Chapter 5:13. Miracle Commerce's savings business in the past only targeted groups, like the gnomes and the surrounding tribes. That was because Miracle City didn't have enough credibility at the time, so they could only work with close allies. The situation now was different. Meng Qingwu decided to properly develop the banking business. This was an important part of Miracle Commerce's strategy, and it could provide Miracle Commerce with an endless supply of funds in the future. As for risk control, there was no need to worry about that. Meng Qingwu was very confident in Miracle Commerce's current situation. Just Miracle Commerce had too many things to invest in, so the failure rate of these investments was negligible. Miracle City's situation was already very different. Whether it was the citizens or the surrounding tribes, they all had a high sense of recognition towards Miracle City. The citizens' savings and the change in currency were already ripe. Meng Qingwu spent quite a bit of effort to create a database of the citizens and popularize citizen cards in the city. There were already initial results, and Miracle Commerce continued to receive tens of thousands of source stones. The city had around 1 million people, so the flowing source stones would reach several million. Even if they could only absorb 1/10 of it, it would still be several 100,000. Of course, in order to motivate the citizens to save money, Miracle Commerce announced the interest rates for individual savings. They opened a current account with an annual interest rate of 5%, with interest being generated every day, and they could withdraw it at any time. As for fixed accounts, there were monthly, half a year, a full year, 2 years, 3 years, and etc. The longer it was saved, the higher the interest. If it was saved for 3 years, the annual interest rate would reach 50%. 100 source stones in the bank for 3 years. Not only would the capital of 100 source stones be a lot, the interest would reach 150 source stones. Miracle Commerce also allowed people to withdraw it ahead of time, but it would be downgraded based on the amount of time it had been saved, and there would be a processing fee. It was definitely a common financial management method. The most important thing was the Great Zhou Country, the Great Summer Country, the various forest cities, and even the other countries. Miracle Commerce was building banks. Miracle Commerce was managed by smart brains, with several super-source energy matrices operating at the same time. The data system would be complete, and after people deposited their source stones in Miracle Commerce, they could withdraw it from any place with Miracle Commerce. Other than that, Miracle Bank had direct spending power. Whether it was the Miracle Shopping Center, Miracle Hotel, Miracle Arena, Trial Field, or Qilin Hall, as long as they were in Miracle Commerce's business, they could all be purchased with a card. It was fast and convenient. Other than that, Miracle Bank was preparing to establish a currency system. The currency could be directly linked to source stones and could be exchanged for source stones in Miracle City. People could use this currency for daily transactions, making life much more convenient. Miracle Banking's transfer business was about to be tested. In the future, merchants would be able to trade with Miracle Banking. This way, it would eliminate the trouble and risk of carrying a large number of primordial stones. Moreover, primordial stones could continuously generate income just by sitting in the bank, so why not? Meng Qingwu was a strategist with great foresight. With Meng Qingwu personally planning and preparing, as well as a capable person like Dolores, how hard would it be for Miracle Bank to develop? Chu Tian had always been indifferent to the affairs of the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce was filled with talented people, so why did he need to blindly worry about this? Chu Tian practiced his sword art every day, reading all kinds of books, and doing research whenever he had time. Although Miracle Commerce's research ability was very strong, one Chu Tian was better than 10,000 researchers. The bottlenecks of the Yun sect could be easily broken through as long as Chu Tian made a move. The young miss was a workaholic and had been very busy recently. Chu Tian came to Yingying's office and saw Yingying sitting at the table, writing something. There were several gnome assistants who were helping her organize the information. Chu Tian, you came at the right time. Did you know that? The number of people opening accounts in Miracle Bank has increased by several times. Meng Yingying happily reported the results. We almost have enough funds. You're thinking of the problem too simply. Miracle Bank can't easily make a mistake. We still have to consider the risks involved. Otherwise, if there is a crisis, people's trust in us will be greatly reduced. With the young Miss' cautious personality, I'm afraid she won't dare move too much money to make loans or investments. Meng Yingying had never thought of this before. She slightly knit her brows. What should they do now? Chu Tian suddenly gave a sigh. Having a big business also has its disadvantages. Meng Yingying was stunned. She didn't know why Chu Tian had this kind of feeling. What disadvantages? Even our Yingying keeps talking about business. This doesn't seem like your personality. Meng Yingying was a bit embarrassed. I just want to help everyone. I'm a bit stupid and can't do anything well. It's a good thing elder sister gave me a few smart brains. Otherwise I wouldn't be able to do anything. Chu Tian hugged Yingying's shoulder. Hi, then don't make it hard on yourself. If there's anything, just leave it to the smart brains and assistants. Why do you have to do everything yourself? Meng Yingying was a bit embarrassed. We're in public right now, so don't get physical. Ha, what are you afraid of? Who doesn't know our relationship? Chu Tian's face was as thick as a city wall. The gnomes were a bit embarrassed and could only pretend like they didn't see anything. Chu Tian said, Come, I'll bring you to a fun place. A fun place? Where is it? The elven small town is holding a gourmet exchange. Vivian sent me an invitation. Gourmet exchange? Meng Yingying instantly revealed an interested look. Chu Tian continued to introduce. Several dozen elves from various towns and forests will gather in Moonshine Town at around dusk. Each elven participating will bring their most delicious food to share with everyone. Think about it, these elves all come from different areas of the Forest of Chaos, so how many delicious things will there be? Tell me, can we miss this kind of fun banquet? Meng Yingying's eyes lit up. There's actually this kind of interesting event. It's said that other than the gourmet exchange, there will also be a forest fashion show, an art exhibition, and a music conference. These are all things that are rarely seen in 100 years. Chu Tian saw that Meng Yingying was already very excited, so he didn't waste any more words. He directly said to Meng Yingying's assistants, I'll leave the matters here to you all. Minister Yingying and I will be leaving for a day or two. Meng Yingying was a bit hesitant. Everyone is very busy right now. If I do this, will it? What are you worried about? Not to mention nothing, even if something happens, I'll take care of it. Chu Tian's attitude was very firm as he said, the Elven King and some other members will also be attending, so this isn't just for fun, it is to promote friendship and strengthen the Elven Alliance. I order you to come with me as the city lord. Is that so? So it's this important. Meng Yingying no longer hesitated as she excitedly said in a high-spirited voice, We can't be casual, we have to prepare Miracle City's best food. Miracle City's food will not lose to the elves. That's right, what clothes do you think we should wear? The two of them discussed as they left. The elven food exchange was indeed a rare sight. Chu Tian originally planned to eat, drink, and have fun empty-handed, but Meng Yingying firmly disagreed. She felt that it was too rude, and that he must prepare food that suited human characteristics. Finally they found the Miracle Hotel's source energy chef. They just happened to have a fresh level 3 high-grade demon beef. The two of them immediately agreed, carefully cooking several large steaks. Meng Yingying's exquisite face was filled with memories. I remember when we were in South Sky City, the first source energy food we cooked was steak, so this is the food that best represents us. That's right. A certain young miss was filled with passion back then and actually wanted to start a business selling steak. Now that I think about it, if we continued doing it back then, perhaps there would have been a chain of steak shops everywhere. Meng Yingying fiercely glared at him. You're not allowed to expose my dark history. I'm not done with you. The two of them packed up the steaks and headed to Moonlight Town. It was unknown how the Elven King convinced the Elven Council, but although the elves built Moonlight Town next to Miracle City, the Elven Town was still closed off. Outsiders couldn't enter, so they didn't know much about the elves' lives. The entire Elven Town had a population of around 10,000 and most of them were young elves. Moreover, the elves were very rich, so there were very few precious items in Miracle City. There were quite a few new products like cell phones in the Elven Town. When Chu Tian brought Meng Yingying to the small town, the two of them were stunned by the scene inside. The entire Elven Town was filled with Miracle Commerce's products. There were giant screens, speakers, and all kinds of exquisite source energy lamps. Each street was covered in a gentle glow, there were tree houses neatly arranged, and all kinds of crystal and wood sculptures were neatly arranged. There were thousands of elves walking around the small town, each person carrying a full food box. There were all kinds of jams, pastries, and elven delicacies everywhere. The elves were singing around the moon well. The entire small town was very lively. The city lord is here. City Lord Chu Tian is here. Chu Tian was recognized as soon as he arrived. Several hundred elves surrounded Chu Tian, and each elf had a face filled with joy. Their eyes lit up like they had seen their idol for a long time. I'm from the Silver Moon Forest. I've heard your story, I really admire you. An elven girl squeezed to the front. My parents and little brother really want to see you. Can you give me an autograph? Of course, there's no problem. Chu Tian picked up a pen with a smile. How many do you want? 1, 2, oh no, 3. All right, I'll give it to you. The elven girl took the autograph and happily cried out, I've gotten City Lord Chu Tian's autograph. I've gotten City Lord Chu Tian's autograph. The other elves' moods instantly exploded. I'm from the Twilight Forest. I also admire you. I'm from Green Jade City. I like to watch movies and my dream is to make movies. There's also me. Chu Tian never would have thought that since he was famous among the elves, he would be surrounded by countless fanatical worshippers. These elves all came from different forest towns and it wasn't easy for them to come to Miracle City. This was because the transport towers could easily harm the main city. The transport towers in other places had restrictions and the transport towers were all managed by smart brains. Each elf that wanted to use the transport tower first had to apply for a transport permit from Miracle Commerce. This transport permit needed to collect a person's information and finally they would be given a citizen card with a spiritual imprint. The elves would be able to use this permit to teleport in the future. Miracle City had temporarily restricted the teleportation area. Even if the elves obtained the transport permit, they could only teleport within their tribe or within their country, which meant they could only teleport in their own territory. If they wanted to teleport to Miracle City, Oldman Small Town, or any other place, they needed to clearly write down the reason and purpose of the teleportation and apply for a special permit for that area. They could only enter after being approved by the government of that area. Otherwise, with the transport array controlled by smart brains, these directions would be sealed and they wouldn't be able to teleport. This exchange was very hard to come by. The elves were representatives from each city and they could only enter after being approved by Meng Qingwu. But they could only play around in Miracle City for a week at most, so they treasured this chance. In their eyes, Chu Tian was a genius that created everything, an omnipotent idol. Now that they saw him in person, how could they not be excited? Chapter 5:14. Chu Tian was surrounded by a large group of elven worshippers and most of them were beautiful young elven girls, which made Meng Yingying on the side filled with jealousy. Didn't he say he was coming to the conference? He was actually here to pick up girls. Cuckoo! What are you all doing? What are you all doing? The Elven Council's chairman Augusta appeared with a shout and the elves quickly retreated. The Elven King Lancelot and several high-level members of the Elven Council had come, as well as several Elven city lords. Vivian was following behind them and when she saw Chu Tian, she immediately winked at him. The Elven Conference, Chu Tian being able to attend made Vivian very happy. Although the speaker's face was not very good and his eyes were not kind, after all, it was this fellow who destroyed the Elven tradition, so how could they hope to give him a good look? Chu Tian did not care about this at all, his face was as thick as a wall. He immediately brought Meng Yingying over to greet him with a smile. You are Miracle City's city lord, Chu Tian? Several unfamiliar elves looked at him with curiosity. These people were all famous characters among the elves, being city lords of elven cities. Even in the Forest of Chaos, they were considered first-class experts. These elves were not unfamiliar with Chu Tian and Miracle City. Although Miracle City's overall strength was not strong, now that they had the Treants, unless it was a giant level power, it was hard for them to be threatened by other powers. They had become a very influential power in the Forest of Chaos, becoming famous in the Forest of Chaos recently. If it's not Chu Tian, who else could it be? The Elven King Lancelot first introduced the City Lords to Chu Tian before saying to Chu Tian, "It said that City Lord Chu Tian has subdued the northern Great Zhou country and has made large progress. This is truly worthy of celebration. Coming to the elven small town despite your busy schedule, the elves are very grateful." Meng Yingying saw the Elven King being this polite and was a bit flattered. "No, no, no. Being invited here is our honor." Vivian cut in, "I invited Big Brother Chu Tian." Augusta revealed a dissatisfied expression. This was clearly an elven gathering. What was wrong with inviting a human? Today is a lively day. We shouldn't just stand here and watch. Chu Tian did not treat himself as an outsider. Miracle City has cooperated with the Eternal Forest of Chaos for many days, and it seems like there are some results. The elves of the Forest of Chaos can gather together. This is very rare. An elven city lord said with a smile, "There are no transport towers in the forest cities, so unless there is something important there, we don't even think about this kind." That's right, City Lord Chu Tian's skills are truly admirable. Another elven city lord sighed in praise. "The elves have fallen too far behind the humans." Chu Tian immediately said, "Actually, the humans are still the same. Cooperating with miracle commerce in the elven language is already at the forefront. Ha ha." Augusta and the old-fashioned counselors all had ugly expressions on their faces. The elves had relations with miracle commerce, and there were more and more elves that wanted to reform. These city lords didn't have much contact with the Eternal Forest, not even meeting once in 100 years, so they didn't strictly follow the Eternal Forest's rules. Now the Elven King was using transport towers to connect the various places. The Elven City Lords all stood on the Elven King's side. Chu Tian sat down with the Elven King, and Meng Yingying had already taken out the steaks she prepared. "Everyone come and try Miracle City steaks. This is cooked by our most outstanding Source Energy chef." "Thank you, Yingying. It really is too delicious. Try our Silver Moon Forest's miracle fruit." Meng Yingying was very beautiful and had a simple and lively personality, being easy to get along with. Not to mention that Meng Yingying often used her image to make movies, and these movies were very popular among the elves, so Yingying was considered a celebrity among the elves. Everyone fought to give her delicious food to try. "This is my cell phone number. Everyone can contact me if there's anything." "What? You don't have cell phones or communication devices?" "It's fine, we'll arrange it early and let the signal cover the area." The elven food exchange this time allowed the elves from different areas to get to know each other, as well as letting the elves meet Meng Yingying and Chu Tian. Everyone tasted the specialties and delicacies of their respective areas and quickly became familiar with each other. Meng Yingying decided to bring everyone to Miracle City to play tomorrow, which made the young elves very excited. The elves had a very rich spiritual life. Halfway through the gourmet conference, there were fashion shows, art exhibitions, tea parties, and music exchanges. Chu Tian finally understood why the elf civilization developed so slowly. It was because the elves never grew tired of these trivial things, especially the arts. This was probably due to the nature of the elves. The elves naturally didn't like fighting, therefore their desire for power, authority, and wealth was not as strong as humans. Chu Tian saw the excited elves and felt very happy in his heart. "I suggest that we hold more exchanges like this. It doesn't have to be limited to the elves. The large races of the forest and even the large races of the continent can all participate. This way we can communicate and improve." "Nonsense," Augusta said with a snort. "Crude spirit beasts and hypocritical humans. Nothing good will happen if these races are with the elves. The elves don't need to interact with these cruel and sinister races." This old man's thoughts were too extreme. Chu Tian wanted to properly teach him a lesson. The Elven King said with a smile, "City Lord Chu Tian's idea isn't bad, but this transport tower is not cheap. Although the elves have a free quota, if we hold a large-scale event, we might not be able to afford it. With several dozen transport towers in the forest, if they operated normally in the future, it would be normal for them to make several 100,000 source stones a month. If there were tens of thousands of people teleporting back and forth, the consumption would be too large. Even a large power like the eternal forest wouldn't be able to afford it. Chu Tian's heart skipped a beat and he calmly said, "The elves are rich, would they care about this little bit of money?" City Lord Chu Tian's words are wrong. An elven city lord said, "The elves have never done business. Although we do have some source stones, it is the savings of our ancestors. If we keep spending it like this, we will run out of resources." Now that the Elven region and Miracle City are connected, the opportunity for us to deepen our cooperation has come. I want to work together with our strong points and conditions. The future will be very worth looking forward to. The Elven King said with a nod. Vice City Lord Meng Qingwu has already discussed the details. The elves will act as the regional communication and information technology agents, and the cities will open miracle shopping centers. This will allow the elves to buy things from all over the continent without going out. Even without merchants, they can sell their specialties to all parts of the continent. This will not destroy the elves' teachings and will allow the elves to prosper. Augusta did not directly oppose this. This was the Elven Council's bottom line. No wonder the Elven Council did not stop the Elven King. The young miss already discussed the details of the cooperation? Did she really have 3 heads and 6 arms? Chu Tian's heart skipped a beat and he suddenly had an idea. Actually, I have another idea and suggestion. I think it will be very beneficial to the development of the elves. The Elven King knew that the humans had many ideas, but since Chu Tian said this, of course he had to listen. What is it? Chu Tian carefully told him his idea. The Elven King's eyes lit up and he discussed it with the Elven City Lords around him. The Elven City Lords all nodded, like they were all in favor of this plan. There were even some who had red faces as they paid their respects to Chu Tian. After all, Miracle Commerce had given the elves a large amount of help on this matter. Vivian was even more pleasantly surprised. She specially invited Chu Tian over to let Chu Tian have a good relationship with the elves. She never thought that this kind of opportunity would allow the elves to discuss such an important matter. In the future, the cooperation between the elves and Miracle City would become even closer. Chu Tian saw the elves happily accept this proposal and he was very satisfied. This was because Chu Tian understood that although this plan seemed like Miracle City would suffer a loss, it was actually a win-win situation. Even Miracle City's biggest problem would be solved by a large half. The next morning, Vice City Lord, did you hear? The elves have just announced a large matter with that fellow city lord. Dolores suddenly rushed over. Meng Qingwu was busy with official business and slightly knit her brows when she heard this. She knew that Dolores was not a person who made a fuss over nothing, so it was definitely something big for her to be this excited. Why did Chu Tian run over to the elves? What did he do this time? Dolores slightly swallowed her saliva. The elves have announced the establishment of the forest's second bank and the continent's second bank, the Elven Bank. Meng Qingwu's eyes popped out. The elves were opening a bank? Was there a mistake? Meng Qingwu quickly understood the situation and was shocked by the results. The matter of the elves opening a bank was true, and from the elves' perspective, this was completely understandable. This was because the elves had already connected all the transportation routes and the Miracle Shopping Center's platform would soon be completed and the communication platform would soon be completed. Whether it was selling resources, building manufacturing, selling specialties, or developing technology, as well as the entertainment industry, the elves would definitely have a wave of entrepreneurship. The elves announcing the bank was to prepare for this. The Eternal Forest and the large forest cities would all invest their money into the bank and give it to the entrepreneurial elves as loans. Wouldn't this promote the development of the elves? Of course, this bank model was good, but it wasn't something they could do just because they wanted to. Chu Tian played a key role in this. He first announced that he would sell 10 space warehouses to the elves, allowing the elves to use them as a space treasury for the bank. Other than that, he announced that he would sell 10 smart brains to the elves, allowing the elves to create a sophisticated and intelligent banking platform. In other words, Miracle Commerce would fully support the Elven Bank in terms of technology. But why was this? Once the Elven Bank appeared, wouldn't most of Miracle Bank's limelight be stolen? After all, the elves had a large influence in the forest. Even if they didn't mention the influence of the elves themselves, just the elven cities alone were enough to create a large business system. The elves had absolute trust in the eternal forest and the elven king, therefore they were 100% assured in storing their source stones. The other races in the forest also had faith in the elves. The Elven Bank would expand even faster than Miracle Bank in the future, so what was Miracle City planning? Chapter 5:15. The Elven Bank attracted a large amount of attention. The elves in the Forest of Chaos had already multiplied for tens of thousands of years. They were one of the oldest races in the area. Although the elves had been shrinking in the last 1 to 2,000 years, they were still one of the strongest races. Even if the Dragon Lord, the Titan behemoths, dominated an area and their influence wasn't weaker than the elves, they were still lacking in terms of influence. Once the elves obtained Miracle City's technology, they would be the most suitable and qualified power to open a bank. It was because of this. Once the Elven Bank was opened, would there still be a matter of Miracle Bank? The elves had over 10 forest towns and several large forests under their control. Their territory would far surpass Miracle Bank and they would instantly become the #1 bank in the forest. This kind of large cake, how could Miracle City be willing to just give it away like this? Meng Qingwu was not in a rush to give an opinion. She understood Chu Tian's personality very well. Chu Tian's thoughts were always jumping around, but he would never suffer a loss. Chu Tian must have his reasons for doing this, so what was he thinking? Meng Qingwu was slightly startled. She seemed to have guessed Chu Tian's thoughts. Dolores, don't be anxious. This matter might not be a bad thing for us, let's see the situation first. Dolores was also stunned seeing that Meng Qingwu didn't have much of a reaction. This fox person had a business background, but she had grown up in a tribe in the Forest of Chaos for a long time, so her experience and knowledge couldn't compare to Meng Qingwu who had been in charge of miracle commerce for over a year. When Meng Qingwu didn't show the expected shock, she couldn't help being a bit suspicious. On the other side, Vivian was in high spirits. The Elven Bank was prepared to be established in the Eternal Forest and the Elven King would be the chairman. The various city lords of the Elven cities, as well as her who was the Vice City Lord of Miracle City, would all become the Vice Chairman of the Elven Bank. This momentum had never been seen before. The elves' influence and reputation were among the highest in the Forest of Chaos. With the elves' strong support, it was only a matter of time before they became the #1 bank in the Forest of Chaos. Vivian didn't have a good business mind, but she knew how important it was to control the capital of the entire forest. At that time, the elves' words would have more weight than now. The Forest of Chaos elves could even become a large financial group that could influence the continent. The day when the elves would become rich seemed to be just around the corner. Wasn't this what Vivian had always been looking forward to? But Vivian was a bit apologetic. Big brother Chu Tian is supporting the elves, wouldn't Miracle City's benefits be greatly harmed? Miracle City has its own technology to establish a bank, so as long as Miracle City has enough time, miracle banks will cover the entire forest sooner or later. Vivian was an elf. Of course, she wanted the elves to be better. But Vivian was also a member of Miracle Commerce and was Miracle City's Vice City Lord. She was very loyal to Chu Tian and Miracle Commerce, so naturally she couldn't bear to destroy Miracle City's benefits for the elves. Chu Tian pretended to be carefree as he said, "For our Princess Vivian, what does it matter if Miracle City suffers a little loss? Don't worry, I'll take care of this matter for you. I'll definitely make you a great hero of the elves, a great man who will lead all the elves to prosperity." Vivian was very flattered and flustered. This? How can this be? We can't let down the company. I appreciate Big Brother Chu Tian's good intentions, but how about I talk to my royal father and we can discuss this matter later? Otherwise, I really don't know how to explain this to Big Sister Qingwu. Vivian, don't listen to this fellow's nonsense. Meng Yingying couldn't stand it anymore and immediately pulled Vivian to the side. You've been with us for this long, don't you understand this fellow? I don't believe that this fellow who won't wake up without benefits will suffer a loss, so don't worry about it. Chu Tian gave a few loud laughs. Miracle City doesn't have a dictatorship, so we don't have this ability. Sometimes sharing some benefits will allow us to gain more, just wait and see. Vivian seemed like she didn't understand. Chu Tian wasn't a person looking for a loss. Vivian was filled with gratitude and admiration for Chu Tian at the same time. When the news spread to the various elven cities and elven forests, it immediately excited countless elves. This was because the elves had been stagnant for too long, so opening a bank for the entire race was an epic-making feat. It was hard to avoid some objections from the Elven Council, but the Elven King and the Elven City Lords fully supported it. The Elven citizens had voted for it with over 90% of their votes, so the Elven Council couldn't go against the citizens. Not to mention the elves didn't leave the forest, which was in accordance with the law. The plan was being prepared like a raging fire. This bank couldn't be opened without Miracle City's technical support because this was a very important matter and Miracle City's high-level members had to discuss the details of the cooperation. Chu Tian only proposed a plan. The ones truly in charge of the negotiations were the Vice City Lord Meng Qinggu and the Finance Minister Dolores. These two were the City Lords and Vice City Lords of Miracle Bank, so they could represent the company and Miracle City, as well as Miracle Bank. The top-secret meeting lasted for 3 days. Finally, Miracle City and the Eternal Forest made a joint announcement. The elves would officially open the Elven Bank project and Miracle City would support the elves with all its technology. Other than that, the two sides would exchange shares. The Eternal Forest would hold 10% of Miracle Bank's shares and Miracle City would hold 10% of the Elven Bank's shares. The details of the cooperation between the two sides were kept a secret, but the two banks holding each other's shares sent the message that the Elven Bank was not a competition with Miracle Bank, but rather a cooperation. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest would become even closer because of this. Dolores's attitude changed 180 degrees. She was confused and even angry at first, but she suddenly became enthusiastic. Under Dolores's urging, the elves changed their procrastinating style and immediately began the bank ceremony in the Eternal Forest. Because the elven territory was already covered in signals, there were various broadcast channels and videos, so the elves were paying close attention to this matter. Could they not pay attention to this? This was a large matter that shook the elves. At the same time, it was a large matter that shook the entire forest. Meng Qingwu had people record the entire process because this could become valuable information for future generations. This allowed many elves that couldn't come to the Eternal Forest to watch the ceremony to watch it through the image transfer mirrors. It was a live broadcast that was sent over. The various city lords all gave their speeches. The Elven Council also recognized the legitimacy of this matter. Finally, the Elven King personally announced the establishment of the bank. In that instant, the elves all hugged each other in celebration. The Elven Bank was announced by the Eternal Forest and several elven towns all participated. The model was the same as Miracle Bank, first taking in deposits with interest and then lending them out at a higher interest rate. Although the interest rate was the main source of income, it wasn't the only source of income. Other than that, there were income from services and intermediate businesses, like the fees for withdrawing money from other places, as well as future guarantees, rentals, pawns, mortgages, and other new methods of income that hadn't been discovered yet. After the Elven Bank was established, before the bank was even built, the interest rate was announced. The Elven Bank's interest rate was much lower than Miracle Bank's. The interest rate for current deposits was only 2% a year and the interest rate for monthly deposits was only 3%. Half a year, 1 year, and even higher terms were all less than half of Miracle Bank's. Although it was like this, it was still high enough. Before the Elven Bank was established, the first deposit had already been made. This was directly invested by the Elven officials. The Eternal Forest directly deposited 500,000 source stones and the other elven cities deposited over 100 to 200,000. In other words, the bank had just been established and it had already taken in over 2 million source stones. This was just the deposit from the elven officials. Miracle Commerce had a close cooperation with the elves. After the Elven Bank was established, they could open a bank card and directly spend money on the Miracle Shopping Center and other businesses. This was very convenient for their lives and it was also convenient to take care of their assets. The elves were a very united race. The elves had absolute trust in the Eternal Forest and the Elven King. The Elven Bank was a large change for the elves. Therefore the elves would support it without any hesitation. Not to mention they wouldn't suffer a loss, so why wouldn't they save money? Would the Elven Bank have less deposits at that time? The elves in the Forest of Chaos had over 20 million people. The elves had a guarantee of credibility. The elves had a guarantee of strength. The Elven Bank had several million deposits when it was established, and it would wildly grow in the future. Moreover, with the Eternal Forest and the large elven cities guaranteeing it, the elves wouldn't do anything like swindling people. Would the forest races worry that the elves would cheat them of their assets? The tribes in the forest would definitely come to the Elven Bank to save money. Even if Miracle City was strong, it was still a bit weak. How could it compare to the elves? So as long as the Elven Bank developed smoothly, it could suck away most of the Forest of Chaos source stones. But for a bank to grow healthily, it couldn't just rely on deposits. If the bank had large deposits and couldn't find large amounts of loans, the deposits would become a burden. The income and expenditure wouldn't form a virtuous cycle, and the interest on the deposits would cause the bank to lose money. Then there was a problem. Where could the elves find all these projects? The elves had just started their internal reforms, so how could the elves apply for loans that quickly? Not to mention with the Elven Bank's absorption speed, the elves alone couldn't use it all. What could they do? They couldn't just let the large amount of reserves keep losing interest in the bank. The Elven Bank's best method was to take the large amount of source stones and transfer them to the Miracle Bank with a certain amount of interest. Not only did this method avoid the Elven Bank's risks, the Miracle Bank's interest rate was higher than the Elven Bank's, so the Elven Bank could earn quite a bit. Miracle Bank's situation was the opposite of the Elven Bank. The elves had enough funds but lacked projects. Miracle Commerce had enough projects but lacked funds. The elves had a large enough reputation and influence, but Miracle Commerce didn't have enough strength and was developing slowly. Now with this method, wouldn't they be able to make up for each other's weaknesses and gain benefits together? When the Miracle Commerce high-level members understood this, they finally understood Chu Tian's goal. After going around for half a day, it was still to pull funds for Miracle City. Chapter 5:16. Father really is a true genius. It was just a spur-of-the-moment idea, and it had this kind of effect. The young miss contacted Chu Tian. The Eternal Forest and the Elven Cities had prepared the first deposit for the bank, and now they were preparing to transfer it. She had Chu Tian go to Moonshine Town to sign the agreement with the Elven King and had Chu Tian bring the smart brain to the elves. Even Chu Tian never thought this matter would go so smoothly. The Elven Bank had 2 million source stones, but because the Elven Bank had just been established, they couldn't use this much money. Therefore, they took out 1.5 million to deposit in Miracle Bank. This was because Miracle Bank's interest was double that of the Elven Bank. Even if the elves didn't dare do anything, just eating Miracle Bank's interest was enough to support the Elven Bank. They could simply lie down and make money. Moreover, this was just the initial deposit. The elves would accumulate more and more. If the elves couldn't digest it in the future, would Miracle Bank still lack money? I've already placed the smart brains I want to sell to the elves into the space warehouse. Meng Yingying ran over to find Chu Tian. She was going to sign the agreement with Chu Tian in Moonshine Town, 1.5 million source stones. Miracle Bank has an additional 1.5 million source stones. This is truly incredible. That's right. Who would have thought it would be like this? Chu Tian was supporting the Elven Bank on the surface, but it was actually greatly benefiting Miracle Bank. The things Miracle Bank wasn't good at were given to the Elven Bank, and the things the Elven Bank couldn't do were given to Miracle Bank. This was a win-win situation, a happy result for everyone. Chu Tian didn't know what modesty was at all. How is it? You're shocked. What did the young miss and that seductive fox say? Meng Yingying replied, Dolores said that your move this time was very beautiful, instantly solving Miracle Commerce's financial problems. Moreover, Elder Sister has to admit that you played with your capital too beautifully this time, actually using a backdoor to develop, perfectly solving several problems at once. Chu Tian laughed wildly. So don't blame me for not being diligent in managing affairs. It's not that I don't want to manage affairs, but I'm afraid that my ability is too strong. Once I make a move, you guys won't have anything to do. Meng Yingying pinched him and rolled her eyes. Stop being so smug. Of course, this was not because Chu Tian was smart. Chu Tian didn't have a particularly keen sense of business, but he had tens of thousands of years of experience. Even if he couldn't innovate, couldn't he just copy it? This was a very common mode of operation in the future. The two arrived at Moonshine Town. The elves had been waiting for a long time. In the eyes of the elves, Chu Tian was their savior. The Elven Bank not only gave the idling elves a career to strive for, but it also gave the elves the drive to improve themselves. With the elves' ability, the bank would definitely become better and better. 10 warehouses, 10 sets of smart brains, a friendship price of 300,000, including after-sales and upgrades. Do you have any objections? No problem. I hope we can deepen our cooperation in the future. It was rare that Chu Tian didn't rip people off. Whether it was the warehouses or the smart brains, they weren't for sale and there was only one of them in the world. Even if Chu Tian asked for a sky-high price, the elves couldn't do anything about it. Selling it to the elves for 300,000 source stones this time, it wasn't an exaggeration to say it was a friendship price. Smart brains are an indispensable part of the bank. Chu Tian said to the Elven King and the Elven City Lords, because smart brains have the logical abilities of intelligent beings, as well as strong calculation, thinking, and memory abilities. Not only can it guarantee the safety of the space bank, it can also store the information of the bank's users. No matter how complex the data is, there won't be any mistakes. Other than that, it can also serve the bank's users. It can analyze the bank's deposits and expenditures, evaluate the feasibility of loans, calculate profits, reduce bad loans, and control risks. The elves felt dizzy hearing this. But it was enough to understand a little. The elves weren't good at calculating and doing business, but smart brains could make it so the elves didn't have any worries. Very good. Within 3 days, we'll send the source stones to Miracle City. The Elven King was in a very good mood. After all, he had completed a large change for the elves. As for the bank deposit agreement and details, we've already discussed it with Vice City Lord Meng Qingwu. This contract needs your signature. Of course it needed Chu Tian's signature. This was a large deposit certificate in the millions. Chu Tian gave it a simple look. There was a total of 1.5 million source stones, mainly divided into 4 parts. 1 part was stored for 5 years with the most interest, 1 part was stored for 3 years, 1 part was stored for 1 year, and there was a small part that was stored for future use. There was basically no problem. Chu Tian placed his spiritual imprint on the contract. I wish us a happy cooperation. The Elven King carefully put the contract away. The elves will remember this favor. How about you come to the Eternal Forest and we'll properly entertain you? There's no need for that. Chu Tian gave a yawn. The Elven Bank is about to be established and I think Your Majesty the Elven King is busy enough. There's no need to bother you with these small matters. There are still matters in Miracle City, so I'll be leaving first. This is also good. The Elven King said to his daughter beside him, Vivian, send off City Lord Chu Tian. Yes, Royal Father. Vivian brought Chu Tian and Meng Yingying out of Moonshine Town. Her face was red from excitement as she danced around describing what happened over the past few days. The elves are the largest beneficiaries of this cooperation. The Elven Bank will play an important role in the Forest of Chaos in the future and the elves' influence and strength will increase. But the elves don't need this much money at all, so there will be a lot of idle funds that will be transferred to Miracle Bank. We can all earn a large profit from this. Big Brother Chu Tian's idea is too great. The Elven Council didn't stop this. This is a bit surprising to me. The Eternal Forest's Elven Council has some complaints, but they can't change the hearts of the people and the city lords. In the end, they could only helplessly accept it. After all, there were no losers in this cooperation. The Elven Council has been in contact for a while and has enjoyed the convenience of the transport tower and the benefits of the communication technology. Actually, their attitude has already changed quite a bit. The elves could not just use the Elven Bank to increase the value of their resources, it could also help the elves. Business loans, cultivation loans, and other kinds of loans were all related to the elves' lives, allowing the elves to live better lives. The elves could control the forest of chaos capital through the bank. If even the money was in the elves' hands, wouldn't it all depend on the elves' face? Miracle City seemed like they were giving up control of the forest of chaos capital, but they were actually borrowing the elves' reputation to speed up their development. So what if the Elven Bank occupied the entire forest of chaos in the future? They had already collected enough funds for miracle commerce, and the Miracle Bank had already spread across the continent, so why did they have to keep their eyes on the forest of chaos? The establishment of the Elven Bank was a good thing for the large and small powers of the forest. Because there was a reliable and trustworthy power to take care of their property, they could use it in different areas, which was very convenient for doing business. They could also use the Elven Bank's credit card to make purchases and enjoy a good stable income. When their cultivation reached a bottleneck and was about to break through, they could take a loan to break through. When their business encountered financial difficulties, they could take a loan to ease the pressure. If they had the ability to start a business but didn't have the money or resources, they could apply for a loan. All of these things improved people's lives. The elves, Miracle City, and the forest races, all three sides were happy. The Forest of Chaos was not a lawless land, and Miracle City couldn't establish an influence like the Eternal Forest in a short period of time. Rather than wasting time developing the market, it was better to give the market to more suitable people. Now the cooperation had been reached. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest had become inseparable allies. The cooperation between the two sides would become deeper, and Miracle City's position in the Forest of Chaos would be consolidated. This was the result that Vivian wanted to see the most. Chu Tian had once again performed a miraculous feat. I'll use spatial movement to send you back. No, there's no need. Meng Yingying shook her head and said, I'll directly go to the nearby industrial area to see how the new intelligent factory is doing. Chu Tian waved his hand at Vivian. All right. You are the Vice City Lord and the Elven Bank's Vice Manager. I need your help right now. Quickly go and work. Don't disappoint me. Vivian said in a loud voice with a straight back. Yes, please be assured. Vivian won't disappoint Big Brother Chu Tian. After saying goodbye to the two of them, she immediately teleported back to the small town. Chu Tian accompanied Meng Yingying to inspect the new factory. The two of them were in a very good mood on the way. Especially Meng Yingying, she simply didn't dare believe it. They had a special meeting a few days ago. The financial pressure that everyone had been under, so much pressure, had actually disappeared this easily. Meng Yingying said to Chu Tian, Miracle Bank has obtained so many deposits, we can invest in the company on one hand, as well as the Great Zhou country and the Northern Militant country on the other. I believe that the company's scale will quickly increase. Was there even a need to say this? When Chu Tian was prepared to speak, he saw the cell phone in his pocket ring. When Chu Tian picked it up, he was very surprised. The one calling him wasn't the young Miss Nangong or anyone else. It was actually Zero. Sir City Lord, Smart Brain number 2 detected an unusually strong life fluctuation half a minute ago. It is currently near you and is suspected to be an outsider expert. Please be careful. Unusual life fluctuation. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows and immediately became vigilant. Almost at the same time, he released his divine sense. Almost in that instant, he felt a strong and dangerous killing intent. Chu Tian grabbed the stunned Yingying and jumped away. The place he had just been standing was instantly blasted open by an invisible energy. This is bad. There's an assassin. Meng Yingying's expression fell when she saw this. Miracle City was not the same as before. To be able to sneak in here to assassinate someone, they definitely weren't normal people. Who sent them? Chapter 517. Miracle City had several times more undead towers than before the war, and there were 2 more smart brains monitoring the city's life fluctuations. Not to mention Miracle City had large amounts of powerful Treants and many elven experts. Their defensive power could not be compared to before. Therefore, if they wanted to sneak into Miracle City, it would be very difficult and risky. Now that these ambushers could sneak past the outer layer and bypass the Trent's defenses, it was enough to show that they were not ordinary people. When Meng Yingying was taken away by Chu Tian, She immediately released her mirror source spirit and released the power of the spatial mirror dagger. The two of them instantly disappeared. Meng Yingying's innate spatial energy was not her own, so she couldn't control her direction at all. Adding in the urgency of the matter, she directly teleported several miles away, just temporarily escaping from the assassin's attacks. The entire process happened in an instant. She didn't even know what the ambushers looked like. Of course, the other side didn't have time to chase. Chu Tian said in a surprised voice, "Your reaction is quite fast. So dangerous. How could there be assassins sneaking into Miracle City?" Meng Yingying quickly said, "I have to have Zero send people to protect Elder Sister, otherwise it would be too dangerous for these people to sneak into Miracle City." Before she even finished speaking, the spatial energy was in chaos. Several powers arrived and several masked people surrounded the two of them. There was no aura coming from them at all. They were clearly experts that could hide their auras. They also used spatial energy. Innate spatial energy users. There was not even 1 in 10 million innate spatial energy users. No matter what country or power, they were priceless treasures and were all focused on being cultivated. This kind of precious and rare talent was given this kind of dangerous mission, not hesitating to risk their lives to kill Chu Tian. Only a giant-level power would be willing to pay this kind of price. Even paying this kind of large price to assassinate him? This showed how much importance they placed on Chu Tian. Where did these rats come from, actually coming to Miracle City? Meng Yingying did not need the other side to make a move to feel that these assassins were very strong. Their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian's and hers, so she wanted to stall for time. No matter how skillful the infiltration method was, once Zero discovered an abnormal situation, she would immediately notify the other parties to come to the rescue. In at most a minute, they would not be able to escape. But the assassin was much more experienced than Yingying imagined. How could Yingying's little trick them? Before they could say more than 2 words, a masked man in a black robe took the lead to unleash his power. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying simultaneously felt that the space around them seemed to have turned into a lump of solidified paste. There was an invisible and unbreakable chain that instantly sealed the entire space, making them unable to move. He was right. It was him. He was a possessor of spatial innate talent. This was not a normal binding, but rather a spatial blockade. With Chu Tian and Yingying's cultivation and strength, unless they were stronger than the other side and forcefully interfered with space to make the blockade ineffective, it was impossible for them to escape. However, this assassin with innate spatial energy was at least in the 7 to 8 true spirit layer. This was a true spirit transformation expert. The two of them completely lost the ability to move. The other black-robed man released his source spirit and a large amount of black energy rose up, instantly condensing into a black cloud above his head. This black cloud covered the entire area in a short period of time. Darkness attributed source spirit? It was another rare source spirit. It was no wonder they could smoothly sneak in. The darkness could block detection, and with spatial energy, the result would be the same even if Miracle City's warning system was several times stronger. The black cloud could block other people's senses, so even if Miracle City sent reinforcements, they wouldn't be able to find them in a short period of time. They could only rely on themselves now. The problem now was that the experts surrounding Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were all existences with terrifying strength. Spatial source spirits and darkness source spirits, they were all experts in the spirit transformation realm. The other 4 were slightly weaker, but they were all in the peak 6th true spirit layer. This meant that any one of their cultivations far surpassed Chu Tian and Meng Yingying. Kill! The 6 assassins cooperated flawlessly. The spatial expert sealed the area, the dark expert shielded the area, and the 4 assassins attacked. The 6 of them moved at the same time, so even if it was a peak 9th true spirit layer expert, it would be hard for them to escape. In this extremely dangerous moment, Chu Tian suddenly turned golden and the 6 black-robed assassins were invaded by a terrifying divine sense at the same time. This divine sense was the strongest they had ever seen in their lives, and it seemed like the divine sense also contained this kind of power. The 6 of them were covered in a blue and white flame at the same time. Netherworld Ghost Flame. Chu Tian's netherworld flame was no longer a normal netherworld flame. It had been nurtured by the Spirit King's body for 10,000 years. It had swallowed the abyss hell flame, swallowed the black flames of death, and swallowed the ice spirit's sacred flame from the ice hole. The netherworld flame was not something normal people could imagine. Even if the 6 of them had dense spirit energy and cultivated protective techniques, they couldn't ignore it. The 4 slightly weaker black-clothed assassins were first frozen in place by the divine sense energy. Immediately after, their protective origin energy was incinerated, and the flames burrowed into their bodies like maggots in their bones. The 4 of them came to their senses and had no choice but to give up on their attacks. They simultaneously used their movement techniques to retreat, and only then did they barely escape this calamity. Divine sense could also contain physical attacks? This was just too shocking. The dark expert was very fast. Countless black clouds condensed into a current that submerged Chu Tian. Chu Tian could feel that this was a flow of dark energy. It had all the characteristics of a dark energy, corroding, swallowing, and polluting. If they were submerged by this energy, Chu Tian and Meng Yingying would die without a doubt. The spatial expert's reaction was not slow as the spatial energy around him became even stronger. There was a chain covered in spatial runes which was the image of a source spirit. Spatial chain source spirit? No wonder it had such a strong restraining power. In terms of source spirit strength, this person's source spirit was not strong, but because it was a rare spatial energy, it was very precious. Otherwise, if it was Vivian with a spatial source spirit close to a god-level source spirit, there was nothing in this world that couldn't be cut. Chu Tian would have been cut into several pieces by the spatial energy. The spatial expert's power became stronger and the spatial chain began to move like a snake. This power seemed like it wanted to pass through space and nail Chu Tian and Meng Yingying to death. Chu Tian and Meng Yingying were still bound by the spatial energy, not being able to move at all. Meng Yingying's face turned pale. This situation was not good. But at this moment, Chu Tian gave a cold snort and his golden eyes indifferently looked at the assassin. Endless purgatory. The spatial expert was shocked to find that everything around him had disappeared. When he came back to his senses, he was in a scorching desert, and most of his body was buried in the boiling yellow sand, unable to move. This was because a large number of ants had appeared in the surrounding sand dunes, and each ant was the size of a fingernail. Illusion technique. Spiritual illusion technique. The spatial expert knew that he was in an illusion, but he had no way to get rid of it. Tens of thousands of ants flooded over like a tide, drilling into his eyes, nose, mouth, and any other part of his body. Some of them couldn't find any holes, so they bit into his flesh and tried to drill in. In just a few minutes, his entire body was filled with bloodthirsty ants. These ants did not just eat his flesh and organs, they even bit his bones bit by bit. This kind of pain of 10,000 ants biting through his body was worse than any cruel torture. When he couldn't take it anymore and thought it was over, suddenly, everything disappeared. He was buried once again, but his body in the sand had turned into 2. Both of his bodies had senses and he seemed to realize something as his eyes filled with fear. Sure enough, the ant tide appeared once again, repeating everything that he had just experienced. This time, he had to endure double the pain. Then 4 times, 8 times, 16 times. 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 100,000 times. This spatial expert could no longer remember how long he had stayed in the infinite reincarnation's spiritual space. In this kind of repeated and deepening torture, his spirit had been completely destroyed. In reality, Chu Tian just glanced at him and instantly bled from his 7 orifices, falling to the ground and dying. Chu Tian's pupils returned to their normal color, because launching such an attack consumed a lot of his energy, so he couldn't use his divine sense for the time being. Such a troublesome spatial expert had died for no reason? No matter how high the quality of these killers was, they probably couldn't accept this fact, so they were stunned for a moment. It was precisely in this moment Chu Tian recovered his mobility and immediately gathered his strength, his eyes turning white. Formless sword finger. The dark attributed expert felt a cold, killing intent enveloping him. In his panic, he used all his strength to block it, but it was all in vain. His head flew out like a dandelion. 2 spirit transformation experts had actually died under Chu Tian's hands. The strangest thing was that no one knew what Chu Tian had done. The 2 of them seemed to have died for no reason. When the other 4 killers saw this, how could they dare keep fighting? They had seriously underestimated Chu Tian's strength, so they immediately used their concealing techniques to escape. The 4 of them flew in different directions, thinking that they could escape. Suddenly, the earth rumbled. 4 thick and sharp tree roots soared into the sky, piercing through the protective yuan qi like it was paper. The 4 peak experts didn't even have the slightest ability to resist, and they were pierced to death on the spot by these tree roots. Was it Cenarius? It could sense what happened here from the miracle gardens? Chu Tian revealed a smile. Even if he couldn't beat them, these assassins wouldn't have been able to kill them. After a while, the various Miracle City experts arrived. The Elven King also arrived with Vivian, but the battle on this side was already over. The entire process was short, but there was no danger. But now, it was worth pondering who sent these fellows here. Chapter 5:18. If the news of the Miracle City's city lord being assassinated in the city was spread out, it would be very bad. Chu Tian didn't want to destroy Miracle City's peace, so he chose to block this news. Since no one saw it, right? Chu Tian wasn't injured at all, so he would treat it as if it never happened. This matter gave Chu Tian an alarm. There were some fellows who didn't give up on Miracle City. It was hard to guard against a hidden arrow. He wasn't afraid of a thief stealing, but he was afraid of a thief remembering. If it happened once, there would be a second time. The Eternal Forest's Vice Speaker Ulysses was sent to Miracle City by the Elven King to investigate this matter for Chu Tian's group. Meng Qingwu asked, "Can you find out who did it?" "It's difficult." Ulysses shook his head and said, "We've checked the corpses, but we didn't find any clues to their identity." How could they feel at ease with this answer? Chu Tian and Meng Yinging were almost killed, and this was in their territory. The ambushers were this strong, even having a rare spirit transformation expert. If it wasn't for Chu Tian's cultivation increasing and his new cultivation technique, who knew if something would have happened? Meng Qingwu asked in an unwilling voice, "To be able to send out this kind of lineup of assassins, I think it's most likely a few large powers. Which side do you think is more suspicious?" "There are spirit beasts and dark elves among the ambushers this time," Ulysses said with knit brows. "If we speculate from the races, the spirit beasts are leaning towards the Savage Highlands, but I've never heard of dark elves in the Savage Highlands. Only the Dragon's Ridge has this race." This guess had no basis and there was no meaning even if it was right. Although there is no direct evidence, it's most likely done by them. Chu Tian stood up and said, "Not taking revenge is not my style." Miracle City could barely protect themselves. Could they fight against these giant powers? They were existences on the same level as the Eternal Forest. Everyone looked at him. This fellow wouldn't be doing something shocking again, right? Chu Tian announced, "This incident is a wake-up call. On the one hand, we have to strengthen our defenses and build a barrier around the city in the shortest time possible. On the other hand, every high-ranking person must bring enough guards and return scrolls with them to prevent any accidents. On the other hand, we can't swallow this insult. We have to use our actions to tell the forest that Miracle City isn't a soft persimmon that anyone can pinch. It's natural for us to strengthen our defenses. How are you going to deal with them? These fellows aren't people we can easily provoke, and if we don't handle them properly, it will cause a large battle. Miracle City can't handle another battle." "City Lord Chu Tian, please don't act on impulse." Ulysses broke out in cold sweat. The elves were cooperating with Miracle City, and if Chu Tian caused any trouble, the Eternal Forest would also be out of luck. I'll say this first, the elves won't be involved in the battle. "Look at you, you coward." Chu Tian revealed a look of disdain. "Forget it, I never expected the elves to help me in the first place." Chu Tian said with a smile, "Why are you so nervous? It's not like I don't have a brain. Please be assured, I know what I'm doing. There's no need for you to worry about this matter." Although the news of the city lord being attacked was sealed, there were still some rumors circulating. This was because 2 days after Chu Tian was attacked, Miracle City began a large-scale construction. They created more restrictions and fortifications for Miracle City, with the most typical example being the Undead Towers. The density of the Undead Towers in the Miracle Mountain Range increased by around 4 times, and there were over 100 of them. Even if each Undead Tower could only control 10,000 undead, these Undead Towers were enough to control an undead army of 1,000,000. As for the choice of the undead, of course they were leaning towards the skeletons. Although there were giant monsters like the Abominations, fierce characters like the Death Knights, or flying soldiers like the Gargoyles, they all had battle strength that surpassed the skeletons by who knows how many times. But the production and maintenance costs of these soldiers were too high, and it was easy for them to pollute the environment. The skeleton soldiers were relatively weak, but after they were processed, they wouldn't bring plagues and wouldn't pollute the environment. It was because they were weak that they could control more. Not only would the skeleton soldiers become Miracle City's guards, they could also be used in large amounts in the mines and factories, giving Miracle City over 1,000,000 workers that wouldn't tire out. Miracle City sent several thousand people to excavate the Death Ruins. The surface of the Death Ruins and its surroundings were covered in a large amount of remains. These remains had been soaked in death energy for tens of thousands of years, so there was a very strong energy contained within. As long as they were awakened as undead, their battle strength wouldn't be weak. Large amounts of remains filled the containers. Miracle City's transport airships hummed the containers and sent them back in batches. Miracle Commerce sent several hundred gnome alchemists. According to the recipe and materials provided by Chu Tian, they made a large amount of corpse refining medicine to soak in these bones. This kind of medicine could fix the death energy in the bones. Not only would the bones become stronger, the energy wouldn't leak out and contaminate the environment. After these remains were processed, they were sent to a special place to be awakened. Several hundred Black Moon Sect cultivators with innate death energy were sent over, using a secret technique to activate their soul flames and awaken the undead. One by one, the skeleton soldiers stood up. These skeletons were different from normal skeletons. Although they were still cold and terrifying, there was no energy leaking out. Their bones were pure white, looking like they were carved from white jade. Miracle City ordered large amounts of full-body armor, sharp spears, and long blades from the Great Summer Country to arm them. In the end, there were several thousand skeletons wearing hard armor and holding weapons in their hands. They were neatly lined up as they headed to their designated area. If they didn't take off their helmets, they would think they were normal soldiers. Miracle Commerce had enough resources, so they quickly produced the skeleton soldiers. In just a few short days, there were already several tens of thousands of them. At this time, Miracle City began to shake. A layer of gray energy rose from all directions of the Miracle Mountain Range, finally gathering in the center of Miracle City. Finally, it turned into a giant energy barrier that covered all of Miracle City. The Miracle City citizens were stunned as they began to loudly shout, "Long live, long live!" Miracle City also has a city protecting barrier. This energy barrier was supported by the earth vein and the energy from the Death Ruins. It was a super large barrier that could cover the entire mountain range. The defensive strength of this barrier wasn't bad. The most important thing was that as long as there was a barrier, any sneak attack would be much harder. Miracle City could use a smart brain to check the situation of the barrier. If any corner was attacked, it was impossible for Miracle City to not know. How hard was it to create a city-protecting barrier? A forest city needed several decades to build and over 100 years to strengthen it. What about Chu Tian? He just connected the earth vein and released the energy from the Death Ruins, finally forming a large barrier around Miracle City. Don't look down on this barrier, it was like a protective umbrella. It was enough to let the Miracle City citizens feel more at ease inside. It was very important to stabilize the citizens and increase the security of the city. Ean's spirit was a bit tired as she walked in front of Chu Tian. The first batch of 100,000 skeletons will be finished in another week. It's been hard on little sister sect master. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the Black Moon Sect's efficiency. I think you might as well build a branch in the Death Ruins. This place is very suitable for your cultivation. Ian Spirit's eyes lit up. This was a very good thing. The energy in the Death Ruins was very strong. Not only was it suitable for cultivation, it could also be used to refine corpses. This was a very ideal place for the Black Moon sect. Because the Death Ruins were close to Miracle City, it was very convenient for the Black Moon sect, saving them the cost of teleporting back and forth. Ian Spirit gave a soft snort. You're this kind? Most likely you want us to stay and use us to develop the Death Ruins for Miracle City. How can Little Sister's sect master say this? What kind of relationship do we have? Nangong Yun came in at this time. Boss, I've investigated the matter you asked me to do. That fast? Chu Tian was very surprised. How is it? Nangong Yun raised her brows and said in a very impolite voice, do you still need to ask? I've already investigated. The Savage Highlands is fighting with several spirit beast countries and they want to swallow them up. We can make an agreement with these spirit beast countries and sell Miracle City's firearms to them. Not only will we earn a large sum like this, we can also make the Savage Highlands suffer. What about the Dragon's Ridge? The Dragon's Ridge is even easier. The Dragon Lord is very greedy. He has the most cities in the Forest of Chaos, but he doesn't have his own people. They are all controlled by other races and lack cohesion, so it's hard to avoid rebellions. Recently there have been 4 or 5 cities rebelling against the Dragon's Ridge. We can also sell them weapons to support them in fighting Deathwing. These people dare to challenge Deathwing, so they have a certain amount of skill. If they can obtain the support of Miracle Commerce's firearms, they will be able to last for a long time and Deathwing won't have time to deal with us. We'll do it like this. Chu Tian said to Nangong Yun, Nangong, Miracle Commerce's firearms business will be given to you. You will be the largest firearms dealer in the Forest of Chaos in the future. Remember, firearms are a good card. Not only will it bring unimaginable benefits to Miracle Commerce, it will also weaken the enemy's territory. Nangong Yun was very happy. Letting her take charge of such an important matter meant that Chu Tian valued her very much. Boss, just leave it to me. After Meng Qingwu understood Chu Tian's arrangements, she naturally understood Chu Tian's thoughts. Miracle Commerce's source energy weapons had been developed for a long time and now the weapons' power, production were ready for commercialization. This was a very profitable business and it was time to start selling them. Chu Tian sold the source energy weapons to the enemy's enemy. This was a very smart method. He didn't directly fight them, but it was better than directly fighting them. Burst Claw and Deathwing were so depressed that they spat out blood. Chapter 5:19. The matter of Chu Tian being assassinated didn't even have time to brew before it was covered up by the things that happened afterwards. Miracle City's city protecting barrier was built and the 100,000 skeleton army was formed. The city's defenses were greatly increased and the firearms business was smoothly developed. The continent's #1 firearms merchant, Nangong Yun, had won his first battle. The 2 buyers showed a strong interest in the source energy weapons. Therefore, after some negotiations, the 2 customers ordered large amounts of storm rifles, destruction machine guns, source energy cannons, and the new source energy weapons. These 2 orders added up to 500,000 source stones. In fact, the total cost of these weapons didn't even add up to 50,000 source stones. It wasn't hard to foresee that in the near future, the firearms business would be as important as a money tree to Miracle City. Other than that, the 1.5 million source stones from the Elven Bank were already in place. Miracle City began to give out loans to the surrounding tribes, encouraging people to start businesses. Other than that, there were loans given to the subsidiary companies within the company, allowing them to invest in the Great Summer Country, Great Zhou Country, and Northern Militant Country. They would develop large amounts of oil fields, rare mines, factories, and various research departments. Miracle Commerce's financial problems had already been solved. This money didn't even need half a year to be invested and they would be able to earn back several times their investment. Chu Tian, the Elven Bank's physical business hall has been opened and the Elven Bank's functions have been completed. The Elven King has invited you and elder sister to the Eternal Forest to participate in the official opening ceremony. Chu Tian, who was cultivating in the Miracle Gardens, received a call from Ying. The elves were quite efficient and the physical business hall was completed. However, this was a good thing, it would prevent more problems. The elves had already established elven banks in their active areas and the other facilities and technologies of miracle commerce were already in place. It seemed like the elves would be the first race in the forest to enjoy the benefits of Miracle City's technology. They had to give the Elven King face when he invited them. Chu Tian brought his followers Meng Yingying and Vivian, finding the young Miss, Dolores, and the others. They came to the Eternal Forest through the transport tower. Everyone look, this is the Elven Bank. After Vivian came to the Eternal Forest, she impatiently brought everyone in front of a building. She pointed at the building behind her like it was a treasure and said in high spirits, "Take a look." The Elven Bank stood in the center of the Eternal Forest. Just like the Elven race's style of being close to nature, the Elven Bank was still mainly made of tree houses. The surface was covered with delicate vines, and it was as tall as a 5-story building. The overall shape was hexagonal, but it had a diameter of more than 100 meters. At first glance, it looked like a giant tree stump, and it was covered with lush branches and leaves. However, this was indeed a building, because upon closer inspection, one could see the windows as well as the exquisite patterns carved on the tree trunk. The symbol of the Elven Bank was a flourishing ancient tree of life. It looked simple, but it was actually elegant. The design of the space inside was very reasonable. The location of the treasury and the smart brain were very hidden, and there were many secret rooms that could store things. The outside could be set up with barriers, and the inside could be set up with restrictions. In short, there were many functions, and it gave people a safe and stable feeling. Meng Yingying couldn't help but praise, "The elven architecture is so strange." Tree houses were everywhere in the elves' territory. These were the most common houses of the elves. Ordinary elves liked small and exquisite houses. Their houses were purely made from a kind of synthetic plant. Only the Elven King's castle had to be large enough to use all kinds of stone. "There's nothing wrong with being special," Vivian said. "This is because our Elven Bank isn't just opening in the elves' territory, we are planning to open it in other forest cities. This kind of treehouse is not only safe, it will also attract attention. It is a symbol of the elves." There was no time to look carefully. Vivian released her spatial energy. They were sent to the Eternal Forest's Elven Royal Palace. The Elven Bank was about to open and the elves in the Eternal Forest arrived one after another. The high-level elves were all standing in the corridor on the cliff, looking at the entire Eternal Forest. "There are this many people?" Meng Yingying looked down from high above. The people in the Eternal Forest were moving, perhaps everyone had gathered here. "Citizens of the Eternal Forest, this is a special day." The Elven King Lancelot was wearing an exquisite elven royal robe and holding the forest scepter in his hand. "After a period of hard work, we have established elven banks in the important areas of the elves, making every elf pay close attention to us. Today, the image transfer mirrors will send this scene to every corner of the elves, allowing every elf to witness this moment. First, we ask Miracle City's esteemed guests to say a few words." The first to speak was Dolores. Of course, Dolores' status couldn't compare to Chu Tian and Meng Qinggu, but as Miracle City's finance minister and Miracle Bank's vice president, she was the most important person in charge of the bank. In the future, the cooperation with the elves would be carried out by her, so letting Dolores speak wasn't strange at all. "I am very honored to speak on behalf of Miracle Bank. The elves have a strong influence and reputation, as well as a reputation that everyone on the continent praises. There is no race more suitable than the elves to establish a bank, and Miracle Bank will be the Elven Bank's most important partner in the present and future. We will work together to explore the new economic field and contribute to the prosperity of the continent. Next, I will announce the details of the cooperation between the Elven Bank and Miracle Bank." Dolores was speaking on behalf of Miracle Bank, so the contents of her speech were mostly on the level of the two banks. These contents were things the elves had never heard of before, so it was very novel to them. When Dolores finished speaking, the elves broke out in a wave of applause. It was Meng Qingwu's turn. Dolores represented Miracle Bank and Meng Qingwu represented Miracle City. Meng Qingwu first said a large amount of pleasantries and flattering words, making the elves feel as if they were floating. Then she threw out the real deal. Today is an auspicious day and I want to announce a piece of good news. Actually, the cooperation with the Eternal Forest has been established before the Elven Bank was established. When the Elven Bank is established, Miracle City's logistics, transport, and information network in the Elven region will be fully covered. The elves all stood up and applauded. This news was just too great. Each elf's brothers and sisters would be able to enjoy a more beautiful and convenient life. Miracle City and the Eternal Forest's cooperation will become deeper and deeper. Not only will we provide technical support for the Elven Bank, we will also connect the Elven Bank to all of Miracle City's services. Whether it is the shopping center, the theater, the trial field, the radio station, the communication station, or even eating, shopping, or even the transport tower, as long as you have an Elven Bank card, you can make any purchases. In the future, Miracle City will invest large amounts of resources to create a large identity database, giving each elf an identity card, making life in the forest more orderly and enriching. Miracle City will become a platform connecting the entire forest. In the Eternal Forest and the various elven cities, each elf's hands were swollen from clapping. Meng Qingwu's words filled the elves with yearning and longing for their future lives. Finally, it was Chu Tian's turn to appear. Chu Tian came to the corridor and looked down. The millions of elves in the Eternal Forest were all looking at him with burning gazes. He revealed a faint smile and cleared his throat to say, "Our beautiful Minister Dolores and City Lord Meng Qingwu have said everything that needs to be said, so I'll talk about something else." The elves instantly calmed down. Everyone stared at him without blinking. This is the best of times, this is the worst of times. Chu Tian's voice spread across the entire Eternal Forest through the speakers. The current world is in chaos and there are naturally endless threats. There are endless wars and killings, so people are still facing many challenges. But the continent is rich in resources, technology, and civilization have just begun. Chaos and order have not been decided yet. Every race and every person has endless possibilities. The elves are one of the most outstanding races in the world, and the elves are one of the purest and noblest races. You should shoulder the mission of this era and use your strength, wisdom, and rigor to influence even more people, letting your purity, kindness, and songs spread to every corner of the continent. All living beings in this world are born in a circle. There is no species that can be isolated from the world, and the elves are no exception. You have already encountered the best opportunity in history. So, please bravely break the shackles, tear off the heavy chains, and chase after the new elven era. The lowliest and most ordinary creature should have dreams. Don't be afraid of not flying high enough because you are sitting on Miracle Commerce's dream carrier. Now please answer me loudly. Do you want to become a top entrepreneur? Do you want to become a popular singer on the continent? Do you want to become a famous artist? Do you want to become a peak expert? The elves were instantly filled with excitement. What? Then come with us to create a new era. We'll start from this forest and start from this continent. Vivian was so excited that tears filled her eyes. Her face was completely red as she shouted with the countless elves. In the eyes of the countless elves at this moment, Chu Tian's figure was like a giant. Almost at the same time, every elven city and elven forest gave off a tsunami-like roar. It's chaos, it's chaos, it's all chaos. Augusta was so angry that his beard stood up. Landlos, did you hear that? This is a blatant violation of the ancestral teachings. Someone come and take away this human-speaking nonsense. Several loyal conservative counselors also had faces filled with anger. This was because in their eyes, the human had evil intentions, actually inciting the elves to go against the ancestral teachings. How could this kind of thing happen? If they weren't stopped, they would have sent him flying with a kick. Sir Speaker, please calm your anger. Ulysses and the others quickly stopped the enraged Augusta. The Elven King didn't care about the chaotic Elven Council because what Chu Tian said was what the Elven King wanted to say, but he couldn't say it with his identity and situation. Now that Chu Tian said it for him, of course he was very grateful to Chu Tian. Many thanks to Miracle City's 3 representatives for their words. This will be recorded in the history of the elves. The Elven King came out and announced, "I, the Eternal Forest Master, the 43rd Elven King, Lancelot, officially announce the establishment of the Elven Bank." Chapter 520. The Eternal Forest speech was sent to every corner of the Forest of Chaos by the magnetic image towers and magnetic sound towers. The Elven Bank's operation became explosive news in the Forest of Chaos. The elves were ignorant of worldly affairs and had been isolated for many years. Were they prepared to come out now? The various powers began to speculate. The elves were a giant in the forest and were the #1 race in the forest. In terms of cohesiveness, no other power could compare, and any action the elves made could change the situation in the Forest of Chaos. Thousands of elves submitted applications to open accounts, and the entire race was like a flood of revolution. Actually, the elves were not inflexible. They had suffered unspeakable hardships from following the ancestral teachings for thousands of years. They could only watch as more and more resources were stolen, more and more territory was eaten away, and more brothers and sisters were taken away by human traffickers. What did the ancestral teachings bring them? They were only becoming weaker and weaker, and their influence was shrinking. The Elven Council was high above, not caring about the people at all. The old men were immersed in the glory of the elves and the peace in front of them. They did not think of any reforms at all. If the ancestral teachings were not suitable for the elves, why would they still adhere to them? The elven laws were written by the ancestors, so if the seniors had the qualifications to write them, why couldn't the descendants change them? Since they were not suitable, wouldn't they be shackles binding the elves? The elves should stand up and do something. Chu Tian quickly returned to Miracle City after giving his speech to avoid being chased by those old elves. He had been paying close attention to the Elven Bank situation in the city. This was because the Elven Bank was not just a large matter for the elves, it was also a large matter for Miracle City. Chu Tian was most worried about the internal resistance of the elves, which was also the reason why he stirred up the elves. As long as he broke through the internal resistance of the elves and let the bank run smoothly, the other problems would naturally be solved. Big Brother Chu Tian, Big Brother Chu Tian. Vivian rushed back to Miracle City to report the good news, bringing everyone the battle report they needed the most. "I've received the data. The Elven Bank has opened the first deposit limit and it's been filled by half in just 2 days." This news shook everyone's spirits. Meng Yingying couldn't help asking, "Upper limit? What upper limit? What's the upper limit?" Father and the city lords have decided that the Elven Bank will temporarily take in a maximum of 5 million source stones. Currently, ordinary elves have no way of depositing, so it is mainly targeted at the middle and high-level elves. Furthermore, deposits cannot exceed 50% of their total assets. Vivian swallowed her saliva and said, "But even with so many profits, it has already reached 2 million source stones." The elves were really rich. However, Meng Yingying couldn't understand why there was a deposit limit and so many messy restrictions. Wasn't this discouraging the enthusiasm of the elves? From Chu Tian's point of view, it was understandable. In the end, the Elven Bank was just an experiment for the elves. In the end, no one dared to guarantee that it would succeed. Besides, if the Elven Bank were to collect all the wealth of the elves at once, would it be able to spend so much money? Transferring to Miracle Bank? Not to mention whether or not Miracle Bank could absorb this much. Even if Miracle Bank could, the Elven King wouldn't dare give half of the clan's wealth to Miracle City. If something happened to Miracle City, or if Miracle City ran away, or if something unexpected happened, it wouldn't be a joke. As for the limit on who could open accounts, on one hand, it was because the middle and high-level members were more resistant to risk, and on the other hand, it was because the Elven Bank's business hall was limited. It couldn't hold several 100,000 people lining up to open accounts, so they could only start with large customers. Rice had to be eaten bite by bite. They couldn't hope to become a fatty in one bite. Vivian said, the current 5 million source stones limit is for the clan. The Elven Bank doesn't have an upper limit for outsiders. There are already several cities that have relations with the elves that have sent envoys over. They seem to be preparing to open accounts in the Elven Bank in the name of their cities. I don't think it will be a small amount. Meng Yingying said in a surprised voice, it can't be, the bank has just been established and there are already other races coming to deposit money? This is very normal. Dolores didn't find it strange at all. How big is the influence of the elves in the forest? Now that the elves have made a move, whether it's to curry favor or to probe, it's fine to support the elves first. Everything is going smoothly. Chu Tian was completely relieved. Our Smart Brains production speed is gradually increasing. How about we sell another batch to the Eternal Forest and let them open more banks? Vivian seized this chance to flatter him. With the smartest big brother Chu Tian in the world, how could things not go smoothly? Nonsense, who doesn't know? Chu Tian gave a shameless laugh. Although what you say is the truth, I am a low-key person, so you can say it behind my back, you don't need to say it in front of me. Meng Yingying almost vomited in disgust. Enough with you. This is only half the battle. Meng Qingwu gave a soft cough. Although she was happy with the Elven Bank's first victory, with her personality, she wouldn't let her guard down. The success of the bank model is not completely decided by the ability to absorb funds, but rather whether the bank can form a virtuous cycle. This isn't hard. Dolores couldn't help saying, if the Elven Bank is in trouble, they can just deposit the extra money with us. Thinking like this isn't feasible. Meng Qingwu said with a serious expression, we support the establishment of the Elven Bank. Of course we have plans to deposit money with Miracle Bank, but this isn't the main goal. Otherwise, the elves' hard work would become Miracle City's wedding dress. This wouldn't be justified. The young miss is right. Chu Tian nodded. Not only do we need to establish the Elven Bank, we also need to keep it running normally. Only like this can the Elven Bank continue to expand and become the most influential bank in the Forest of Chaos. Meng Qingwu added, once our cooperation with the elves succeeds and the elves gain enough benefits, it can be considered setting a benchmark for our Miracle City. At that time, there will be no need for our foreign and commerce departments to take the initiative to negotiate. There will be an endless stream of powers coming to cooperate with us. Vivian was very moved. Big brother Chu Tian and elder sister Qingwu were too righteous. Meng Yingying also supported the two of them. What should we do next? It's simple. We've already established the Elven Bank, so we'll support the grassroots elves to start businesses. Meng Qingwu said to Vivian and Meng Yingying, Princess Vivian, Yingying, your mission during this period of time is to promote the development of the elves. Yingying is the production minister, so you need to use all your resources to build factories in the elven cities and the surrounding areas, guiding the elves to start businesses. Our Miracle Commerce's technology, as long as it isn't our core technology, we can give a part of it to the elves. For example, small products like the electric lights, the cooking array technology, the movie production technology, and etc. Yingying immediately stood up. All right, I know what to do. Vivian was also very happy as she said, you will all be the great benefactors of the elves. Don't say any more, quickly go. Chu Tian suddenly thought of something. That's right, our beauty Dolores doesn't need to be busy anymore, so how about you bring a fox caravan over to help? You have to know that the elves don't have any business sense. Dolores took the initiative to volunteer. I'm willing to bring the fox merchants to the elven area and help the elves with their business plans. Meng Qingwu thought about it before nodding. That's also good. Let's go. Vivian said with high fighting spirit. The beautiful future of the elves and the Forest of Chaos will be created by us. The three of them left the conference room. Meng Yingying went to organize the production department. Dolores went to organize the fox merchants. Vivian went to organize the itinerary and planning. The three of them didn't just come for the elves. Meng Yingying would help the elves build large amounts of factories in the elven area. These factories would be a joint venture with the elves, so wouldn't the final product be according to Miracle Commerce's will? Dolores would bring the merchants to the elven area to turn stone into gold, turning the worthless mines and resource fields into precious wealth. She would let the elves turn the most common local products into popular products in the shopping center, and she would train the elves to form a company that would depend on miracle commerce in the end. The more prosperous the elves were, the more prosperous the forest was, the more prosperous Miracle City was, and the more prosperous miracle commerce was. This in itself was a virtuous cycle. After a few days, the elven bank was filled with the first 5 million source stones. The elves had long lifespans, and to the elves, 3 to 5 years wasn't anything. Therefore, most of the deposits were over 3 years, which meant that it was hard for the elves to redeem their deposits in a short period of time. What was shocking was that the deposits outside the race were also close to 1 million. This was the deposits of several cities, with each city having over 100 to 200,000. This wasn't much to a city. They could express their goodwill to the elves and also test the waters, so they were willing to take it. There was too much money. How could the Elven Bank spend it? The Elven Bank, in order to maintain its operating costs, took out 2 million for 5 years and transferred it to Miracle Bank for 5 years. Miracle Commerce's 5-year interest was double that of the Elven Bank, so just the interest from this transfer was enough to cover the Elven Bank's entire interest costs. The Elven Bank began to try lending to the elves, something that the Elven King and the various cities didn't expect happened. The Elven cities were much more enthusiastic about applying for loans than expected. Some were preparing to open a potion shop, some were preparing to open a talisman shop, some were preparing to sell herbs, some were preparing to sell leather, some were preparing to open a factory, some were preparing to open a mine, and there were even more arts and entertainment businesses. For example, the Elven Source Energy Restaurant, the Elven Film Studio, the Elven Trial Field. The amount was unimaginable. Could the elves not trust their own people? The elves were rich in resources and had many things to do. As long as they were willing to take risks and had a bit of brains, they wouldn't suffer a loss. The Elven Bank was very lenient to their own people, not even asking for a mortgage. As long as they had a project and a reasonable loan, they would all accept the loan. In the end, they released 200 loans in just a few days, reaching a total of over 1 million source stones. The Elven King was so excited that he almost couldn't sleep. This was not a sum of source stones, but rather a seed. He could feel that his goal of reform was getting closer and closer. The elves were filled with enthusiasm, so how could the Elven King and the various city lords not support them? They immediately opened the Elven Bank's deposit system and increased it by 5 million. The Elven King didn't care about the gains and losses. Even if they lost everything, it was worth it as long as the elves were changed into a pool of stagnant water. This was something money couldn't buy. Not to mention, with Miracle Commerce's supervision and Smart Brain's risk control, the possibility of the elves losing money was very small. The elves would be the biggest beneficiary of this reform. Chapter 521. The Elven Bank's development momentum was very good, giving the Elven King and the Elven City Lords a peace of mind. When the Elven Bank announced an increase in deposits, they also decided to increase the number and scale of the banks. It would be best if they opened banks in other cities, obtaining more deposits. This would increase the influence of the elves and they could use the wealth of other races to develop their own race. Just thinking about it made people excited. Want to expand? This definitely couldn't be done without the support of Miracle Commerce's technology. The young miss generously waved her pen and sold another 20 smart brains at a friendship price of 400,000. Was it very dark? This was a top product of the Smart Brain Company. Wasn't it up to Chu Tion's group to decide how much it cost? This price wasn't considered expensive. With the Elven Bank's current momentum, even if they sold it at double the price, the elves wouldn't buy it. The young miss considered long-term benefits and disdained the small benefits in front of her. The company could produce 5-6 smart brains a day, which could satisfy their needs. In the future, the production of smart brains would only become faster and faster, so they couldn't let it affect the popularity of their allies. This was a very important and profitable product. Miracle City's current situation was that while they were wildly selling weapons to give the Savage Highlands and Dragon's Ridge a headache, they were also selling smart brains to allow the Eternal Forest's elves to quickly develop, restricting their enemies and increasing their allies. Whether it was the source energy weapons or the smart brains, they could all bring benefits to Miracle City. After the Elven territory was opened, Miracle Commerce's other products like cell phones, theaters, source energy food, and etc. Moreover, they followed the elves and continued to expand into other areas, which was definitely a very profitable business. Not to mention the fact that the Elven Bank was developing so quickly, large amounts of money were being transferred to Miracle Commerce. A portion of this money would be used to create new factories and resource fields, creating stronger production and resource channels. A portion would be loaned to their companies, quickly catalyzing new products and technologies. The rest would be invested in the Great Zhou country and the other 3 kingdoms to open up new markets. The company formed a virtuous cycle. Its influence spread to more forest cities and to more kingdoms. However, the faster they developed, the more they couldn't be careless. Miracle Commerce was becoming stronger and stronger. Not only were the forest of chaos powers sitting on pins and needles, they were most afraid of attracting the attention of the top powers on the continent, like large empires. That was not something Chu Tian could resist. The company had to become stronger. Miracle Commerce and Chu Tian did not have much time. Miracle City's people were all working hard. Nangong Yun had turned into an arms dealer to sell weapons. Feng Kaidai and Yun Yao were opening up the market. Meng Yingying, Vivian, and Dolores were in the Elven region. Chen Bingyu and the others were developing in the Great Zhou country. Dongfang Haoren was busy training troops for Miracle City, and there was no need to mention the young Miss Meng Qingwu. Since no one was around, and the Missy had no time to care about him, Chu Tian suddenly felt bored, so he took the elevator to the underground base to see how the work was going. The gnomes' underground research base had changed greatly. This was because the gnomes did not need to manage the city and everyone could come here to do research. There were also large amounts of scholars from the Yun sect, bringing large amounts of Miracle Commerce's technology, so it was much more lively than before. City Lord Zero, the city administrator, had automatically notified Clark. When he received the news, he immediately came out to greet him. "Why are you here?" Chu Tian casually looked around. "I'm here to inspect the work and see how the projects are doing." "Clark, is this place still good? Is there enough research funds?" It's enough. Yesterday, Vice City Lord Meng Qingwu doubled the base's funds. We have never had this much money before. That's good. How is the strengthening of the divine servants? Please come with me. In a secret research room, there were 18 divine servants. They were all placed in containers and were undergoing further modifications. According to the City Lord's request, we have purchased and consumed a large amount of materials to modify the divine servants. These divine servants have already been infused with a very strong energy. I estimate that after this modification, these divine servants' strength will reach the rank 6 True Spirit. The 6th True Spirit layer was already considered an expert in the Forest of Chaos. There had never been a puppet that was this strong before, not to mention that the divine servants themselves were not simple. If this modification was successful with the 18 divine servants by Chu Tian's side, their strength would increase by a large amount. This doesn't matter. With money, resources, and time, how hard would it be for them to grow? Chu Tian was not surprised at all. What I want to ask is, how is the research on the consciousness implantation going? Clark gave a bitter smile. City Lord, this is too difficult. I'm afraid it can't be done in a short period of time. The entire Source Energy Computer Research Department has been moved here. I can't be satisfied with your answer. Chu Tian was brought to an underground castle. This underground castle was an independent existence that was different from the other castles. It had the highest level of security because this was the research center for the Source Energy Matrix. It was already larger than the Great Summer Country. The Source Energy Matrix was one of Miracle Commerce's most important technologies. Most of the Yunsek's researchers had been transferred over, and adding in the gnomes, there were over 5,000 people, and each one was an elite among researchers. This kind of investment was not something any department could enjoy. At this moment, the several hundred laboratories in the research center were all busy researching the matrix. A super source energy matrix was made up of several source energy matrices, and each source energy matrix was made up of several hundred source energy arrays. This was the source of the source energy computer. In the beginning, Sir City Lord provided the core technology, and the UNSEC's researchers worked day and night, investing a large amount of time and energy to finally create the source energy matrix, only the matrix was not perfect. In the last few months, our research center has been investing more and more. Our focus is on breaking down each matrix and even improving the source energy arrays of the matrix. This is a very large project, but it's a good thing we have a lot of people and now we have SmartBrain's help, so our efficiency has increased by a lot. We have upgraded 0 several times and now we can calculate 40 times faster. However, this increase is based on the optimization and strengthening. It is not a qualitative change. The biggest breakthrough in the research center is the microchip and the matrix language. Chu Tian had already understood most of the breakthroughs in these areas. For the first cell phone sold by Miracle Commerce, this cell phone actually contained the newest core technology of Miracle Commerce. There was a microchip embedded as the central processing unit, and this central processing unit was called a chip. The microchip size was small and its computing power was very weak, so it could not be embedded with intelligence. Without a core consciousness and instructions, how could this microchip operate? For this reason, the research center had worked with the UNSEC to develop something called the matrix language. The matrix language could be used by a computer. Using the matrix language to program, it could form all kinds of instructions. The cell phone was more flexible and had more functions. This was because the research center used the matrix language to write a very simple operating system. The matrix language had a lot of room for improvement. In the future, even if the matrix was not given artificial intelligence, it could still be used to write a very complex system or function. This could be considered a large step forward for the computer research center. These things being researched was not for the cell phone at first. Chu Tian wanted to create a kind of implantable intelligence that could be implanted into a puppet? How could this matter be easy? The research center had just developed a chip that could be used on normal equipment, but the company's current technology could not be implanted into a puppet. Chu Tian asked, "What is the biggest bottleneck?" There are two main bottlenecks. One is the lack of technology, which can only be solved with time. The other is the problem of materials. If we want to make a smaller, faster, and better matrix, we need to find a more perfect carrier. Chu Tian passed by the raw material room. Large amounts of transparent crystal pieces were neatly arranged, and each piece was a single source energy array that formed a source energy matrix. If hundreds of these crystal pieces were stacked together and combined in a three-dimensional manner, they would form a matrix. Many of these matrices were connected together and they would form a complete super source energy matrix. Very complex, very complex. Different materials had different capacities for the source energy array. If they could find a more perfect material, perhaps they could shrink it by 10 times. This kind of material had a large industrial requirement, and Miracle Commerce still had a hard time meeting this requirement. When Chu Tian was thinking of a countermeasure, the entire underground base shook a few times. Chu Tian was a bit stunned. What happened? Is there an earthquake? Impossible, there wouldn't be an earthquake in this place. When the gnomes built the underground base, they used large amounts of shock-absorbing stones to reinforce the underground space, so the vibrations in the ground should be absorbed by the shock-absorbing stones. Therefore, an earthquake shouldn't affect this area. Clark suddenly thought of something. This is wrong. The vibrations seem to be coming from the Devil's Maw. Chu Tian teleported nearby with Clark, and the two of them were shocked when they saw the situation. They didn't know what happened in this area, but it had already turned into a mess. Several dozen-meter-thick pythons were moving around. Fierce and terrifying underground life forms were wildly charging out of the Devil's Maw. The gnome guards were caught off guard by this sudden invasion. It was a good thing Miracle City had prepared source energy weapons here, and several heavy machine guns were wildly firing to barely resist. Large amounts of dark life forms are charging in. We won't be able to defend for much longer. Chapter 522. The underground and surface creatures mostly minded their own business. What was wrong with these fellows? They were all wildly charging over like they had taken aphrodisiacs. But it wasn't important why the monsters came. The dark creatures were very dangerous and their numbers were unknown. This exit was connected to Miracle City's research base, so once large amounts of dark creatures charged into the research base, it would bring immeasurable damage to Miracle City. Stop them! Chu Tian jumped out of the abyss and his hands swept out at the same time. Two extremely fast sword chi instantly intertwined as they shot out, instantly tearing apart a giant centipede. Before he even landed, sword! He released his soar spirit. The demon god sword was as black as jade and the sword hilt was engraved with patterns. The sword body was covered in inscriptions and it was surrounded by a destructive power, releasing a terrifying aura that made people's hairs stand on end. Chu Tian reached out to grab the sword in his hand and thrust it at the entrance of the cave. Large amounts of sword chi turned into several hundred black treasured swords that bombarded the entrance of the cave like a storm. Several dozen dark creatures were killed on the spot. The city lord is so strong. This kind of cultivation base can have this kind of destructive might? The gnomes were very shocked by Chu Tian's strength. The phaseless sword was very strong, but it couldn't be casually used because it consumed too much energy and its killing power was too strong. It was only suitable as a killing move, not suitable for group battles or prolonged battles. When Chu Tian practiced the phaseless sword, he had studied large amounts of the Great Zhou country's heavenly sword sect's inherited sword art. There were several first-class sword cultivation techniques among them. He extracted the essence from this vast sea of sword techniques and finally used his own experience to create a sword art called the Heart Sword. What was the Heart Sword? There was no sword in his hand, but the sword was in his heart. It didn't matter if Chu Tian lost the Netherworld sword, he didn't need to rely on normal items now. Chu Tian had a powerful vision domain divine sense and combined with the heavenly sword sect's sword control path. The sword came from the heart and the soul was the sword. As long as his divine sense didn't stop, the sword would never stop. There were more and more dark creatures. A large number of species that had never been heard of appeared. A strange iron beetle broke through the rock and came out of the rock wall. Even though it was hit by the storm of origin energy bullets, it was not afraid at all. It continued to charge forward after destroying the bodies of 4 or 5 half-elf warriors. Chu Tian swung his sword at him. The iron-armored bug was split into two. The sword chi of destruction shot out dozens of meters and cut down a scorpion monster. Chu Tian held the sword in his right hand, and a fireball appeared in his left hand. He threw it at the group of moths, and the fireball exploded and turned into a sea of fire. This fire was not like ordinary fire, as it disappeared with a flash along with everything that was engulfed in it. The big moths that were aggressive just a moment ago disappeared in the blink of an eye. "No!" Clark shouted. "There are too many of them. We can't stop them at all." Giant centipedes, strange insects with iron shells, black snakes, scorpions, and countless other underground monsters crawled out endlessly. Although there were quite a few gnomes stationed here, facing this kind of fierce attack, it was still a bit hard for them to resist. These underground creatures were very fierce. It was fine if there were many of them, but some of them even had true spirit-level battle strength. Chu Tian knew that if they continued to resist, the gnomes would suffer heavy casualties. Should he retreat? Then the base would be in danger. When Chu Tian was weighing the pros and cons, the rock wall above his head was suddenly cut open. Several tree roots drilled through the thick rock layer and fell into the underground space. These tree roots quickly grew, turning into small tree ants that were 3-4 meters tall. "It's Cenarius!" Chu Tian already knew that Cenarius wasn't weak, but he never thought he would be this strong. Everything that happened in this deep underground base, he could sense it from the surface and he could even summon several clones to help him fight. Cenarius was one of the peak experts in the Forest of Chaos, so even if his clones came, they would still be very useful reinforcements, greatly reducing the pressure on the gnomes. At this time, the elevators in the underground base quickly moved and large amounts of Miracle City experts arrived under Dongfang Howren's lead. Zero's efficiency was very high. When Zero knew the situation here, he immediately went to find reinforcements. Chu Tian broke out in laughter. "You've come at the right time." Dongfang Haoren saw that the situation was critical and didn't waste any words. "Exterminate those damn insects. Don't let them take half a step forward." Miracle City experts were sent over in batches. Although the monsters were very fierce and powerful, they weren't strong enough. After fighting for over half an hour, the Devil's Maw was already covered in corpses. It should have been the large amount of their kind dying that made them panic, so these fellows didn't come any closer. Chu Tian left a group of people to defend the area while he returned to the city to discuss it with Meng Qingwu. This was not a small matter. If there were countless insects crawling out of the ground, it would be a large threat to Miracle City. Dongfang Haoren came over to report. "We've roughly calculated it. We've just killed over 30,000 dark creatures and there are over 10 different species." Over 10 different species? Meng Qingwu was a bit confused. Why are there so many? Dongfang Haoren was also confused. What makes us feel the strangest is that these underground dark creatures should be natural enemies with each other. Meng Qingwu tightly knit her brows. Could someone be controlling them? Controlling? I don't think so. Chu Tian didn't find anything suspicious. These monsters are rushing to crawl out. It seems like they are running for their lives. Running for their lives? If my guess isn't wrong, there should be a large change underground that caused these dark creatures to panic, making them run for their lives. Meng Qingwu was a bit uncertain. "We don't know anything about the Forest of Chaos underground world, but this matter can be big or small, so we can't just ignore it. We'll immediately recruit a group of warriors to investigate the underground world." This was a must. If they knew that there were so many insects crawling out from under their feet, they wouldn't be able to sleep well in the future. The young miss is right, but there's no need to recruit warriors. It's not good to have more living people, so I'll personally go to the depths of the underground world. Chu Tian recommended himself, but he knew that the young miss would not agree. After all, the underground world was a completely unknown space and it was not a wise decision for an important person like Chu Tian to take the risk. So he immediately added, "Because the underground world is mysterious, it's best for me to guess. My cultivation technique and abilities are enough to protect myself in any environment. If we recruit some stupid forest warriors, I don't think they'll find any valuable clues before getting lost." This was reasonable. With Meng Qingwu's understanding of Chu Tian, she knew that since Chu Tian had brought it up, he definitely wasn't discussing it with her. So even if she wanted to stop him, it would be useless. She could only sigh and say, "Then you must be completely prepared. You must bring the little fox and the city return scroll." Young miss can be assured. "I haven't married Yingying yet. How could I be in a rush to have an accident?" Meng Qingwu fiercely looked at him. "You only think about Yingying and never think about anyone else. In front of everyone, why are you being jealous?" Dongfang Haoren was a bit embarrassed as he cupped his hands and left. Meng Qingwu's face turned red and she snappily said, "I'm about to be angered to death by you. Come with me." Chu Tian was brought to a secret room. Meng Qingwu took out 2 bottles of pills and gave them to him. This is the company's newest true spirit pill. Although it's not cheap, its effects are very good. As long as one doesn't surpass the true spirit realm, a single pill can instantly recover all their spirit energy. Other than that, there are many precious materials added to this pill, so taking it often will help increase one's cultivation base. Miracle Commerce's new technology and products were shining too brightly, almost overshadowing a few traditional industries. Actually, refining talismans was a very profitable business, so Meng Qingwu never thought of giving it up. She had learned a lot of knowledge from Chu Tian and had formed a talisman research center with the gnomes. In the future, these traditional businesses would bring large profits to Miracle Commerce. The True Spirit Pill was the newest pill. The cost to refine this pill was very high. Each pill was almost 10,000 source stones. Not only was it a top-quality recovery pill, it was not inferior to a high-grade sacred pill. It was also very pure and did not have any rejection, so it could be used for a long time. Because it was very expensive, This pill was not suitable for large quantities. The 2 bottles that Meng Qinggu refined were all prepared for Chu Tian. Chu Tian was very touched by this. It's good that the young miss has done this much for me. I really can't repay you. Meng Qinggu snorted. It's good that you know this. Be careful from now on. You have to be fair. Do you understand? What are you being about? Why aren't you going to prepare yet? Meng Qinggu gave a snort before swinging her sleeve and leaving behind a few angry words. I still have a lot of official business to take care of. Chu Tian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Most of the eldest miss was dignified and steady. Sometimes, when she became unruly, she was not inferior to Nangong Yun. It was just that she never showed this side of her to ordinary people. This was probably the true temperament hidden under the surface. He definitely had to explore the underground world. Chu Tian was clearer than anyone else that there was a giant empty space under the forest of chaos. Hence, the underground world here was probably much larger than anyone could imagine. This was a space completely different from the surface. What was the underground world like in this era? What level had the underground civilization of this era developed to? These were all questions that Chu Tian wanted to understand. Fox, prepare yourself, we're about to leave. He didn't bring anyone with him this time, only bringing the little fox. The little fox had been eating and drinking in Miracle City every day, so its furry body looked a bit fatter. It was time to bring it out to lose some weight. Chapter 523. The forest races all knew that there was a rich and vast world under the ground, but as for what this world was like, even the oldest elves in the Forest of Chaos did not know. Legends say that it was a world that never saw the light of day, giving birth to hundreds of millions of dark creatures. There were also large amounts of ancient creatures that survived, making the underground world a very dangerous place. There were also legends that the underground world was a paradise. When the great ancient world shattered, large amounts of demon and gods' realm treasures were buried inside. There were even legends that the underground world was connected to the world of death, with countless terrifying demons running amok inside. In short, the underground world was completely different from the surface world. Whether it was the living environment or the ecosystem, it was completely different. Therefore, the underground world's creatures rarely participated in the battles on the surface. Of course, it was the same reason the surface creatures had no interest in the underground world. There was no information and no map to guide them. Chu Tian was directly exploring the unknown. Wasn't this a bit too careless? No one knew what would happen underground and no one could guarantee what they would encounter underground. City Lord, have you truly thought this through? Clark sent Chu Tian to the Devil's Mouth Cave. The gnomes have tried to map the space around the cave, but they have failed every time. You have to know that the Devil's Mouth is only the entrance to the underground world. It is several hundred miles away from the true underground world. That's right. It wasn't the height, it was the depth. Who knew what was several hundred miles down? Who knew if there was a path to the underground world? Not only was the underground world filled with unknown dangers, the environment was also very complex. It was not something normal people could imagine. Even the most legendary adventurer would be lost forever inside. Relax. Chu Tian patted the scrolls on his belt. I've made all my preparations, we have to go this time. Stop being so fussy, let us go. Even a peerless beauty like the young miss can't stop me, so how could a short and ugly old man like you still be fussy? Clark had no choice but to let him go. After the monster riot, the defenses of the Devil's Mouth Cave had increased. Whether it was weapons or manpower, they had increased several times to prevent something like this from happening again. In my opinion, why don't we build an undead tower here to facilitate the establishment of a monitoring station? Chu Tian suggested before walking into the cave. Because the undead tower has the ability to detect life activities, if a monster wave breaks out again, it will be able to give a timely warning. Furthermore, an undead tower can control tens of thousands of undead skeletons. These undead skeletons that are not afraid of death are the most ideal guardians. Understood. The Devil's Mouth was very different. Chu Tian frowned as soon as he walked in. Damn it, why is it so smelly? There used to be a large number of evil eyes in the area, but they had all gone into hiding. As for those that didn't, they had turned into corpses. Apart from the monsters that originally lived in the area, the entire cavern was filled with the corpses of various creatures that had never been seen before. It was like a messy slaughterhouse. Large numbers of dark creatures would attack and devour each other in the process of a riot. The little fox sniffed around like a dog. It dug out quite a few crystal cores from the wreckage and swallowed them down like snacks. Chu Tian was very impatient. Stop eating. Look around. Where did these creatures come from? I want to find the source. The little fox shook its head. What? You can't find it? The cavern was too chaotic and there were tens of thousands of creatures coming and going. The cavern itself was very complicated and the little fox had no way of finding where they came from through their auras. It could even be said, these monsters did not come from the same place. The little fox's aura tracking method could not find the correct path. You waste only knows how to eat. You can't do anything at the critical moment. With such a large cavern, how do you expect me to find the exit to the underground world? Chu Tian's accusations had no effect on the little fox. This little fellow had been with Chu Tian for a long time, so its face had already surpassed its master's. In this short amount of time, the fox had eaten at least 100 beast crystals. How was this an exploration? This was simply a picnic. Miracle City's underground base was around 400–500 meters deep. This depth didn't count for anything in this world, it was just the surface of the continent. Now they needed to find a path to the underground world in this complex environment. Although the high-energy minerals could release light and the energy and light could stimulate the underground plants, the deeper the energy was, the more negative it was. It had a strong corrosive effect on the surface creatures and the strong energy radiation was enough to kill them. It was true that the underground plants could create breathable air, but they released all kinds of poisonous gas that could kill people without them knowing. Not to mention finding the underground world for normal cultivators, it would take a lot of courage to explore this cavern abyss. But Chu Tian had already made up his mind. He had to find it no matter how hard it was. Chu Tian swallowed a few pills that he personally refined and then picked up the fox as he began to move. There was no map and no clear route, so he just had to go deeper. The entire space was like a large rock that had been corroded. It was like a beehive or an ant's nest, with complicated and irregular passages. There were all kinds of precious or veins, all kinds of underground plants, and all kinds of dangerous underground creatures. There was one question that everyone was curious about. Why did the underground space not collapse after tens of thousands of years? This was because there were two kinds of energy supporting it. The first was the energy released from the Earth's core and the Earth's veins that continuously strengthened the ground. Each stone here was as hard as steel, forming a strong material frame. The other was the energy field that covered the underground world. Even if the main physical support was destroyed, this bubble-like energy field could support the existence of the underground space. The little fox took out its divine eye to scan its surroundings. Chu Tian followed the little fox's instructions and avoided the dead ends. One man and one beast began to explore the underground world. Chu Tian did not know where he was and Chu Tian did not even know if the underground world had been opened, but Chu Tian continued to go deeper. The spatial ability was very useful. Chu Tian could easily pass through obstacles that were hard to pass through and he could avoid some dangers, which greatly increased his speed and efficiency. What the hell? Chu Tian sat down on a large rock to rest in exhaustion. He took out a true spirit pill from his chest and quickly recovered his consumed spirit energy. We've already been walking for a day and a night, right? Why haven't we found anything special at all, other than the chaotic dark creature nests? In the era of 30,000 years later, Chu Tian had gone to several underground kingdoms on the continent, but Chu Tian had gone to the underground kingdoms through the transport array, so he didn't need to personally explore the thick ground. Not to mention that the ground had changed a lot in 30,000 years. Most of the underground world had been destroyed and the remaining underground kingdoms had been modified. Chu Tian's body was covered in dirt and his hair was a mess. Although with the little fox's divine eye and Chu Tian's own spatial ability and divine sense, he could avoid the monster nests every time he came in contact with them, it was hard to avoid encountering them several times. Basically, any creature that could survive in such an environment would definitely not be easy to deal with. Several battles made Chu Tian feel very embarrassed. The little fox was still playing with its large eyeball, but this time the little fox's eyes suddenly lit up like it had found something special. It immediately jumped up and danced around, using its claws to point in a direction. Chu Tian looked in the direction the little fox was pointing at. This seemed to be an underground canyon that was filled with extremely dense dark energy. All kinds of dark purple and dark red crystals grew all over the rock walls and paths like bamboo shoots. Normally, a place like this was the territory of a dark monster. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? This kind of place is not easy to walk through. The little fox was very sure that this was the right place. Chu Tian did not have a better choice. Since this fellow was this certain, then he might as well give it a try. Perhaps there really was a way out. It was just as Chu Tian expected. The energy here filled the entire space, far surpassing his imagination. Under that thick dark energy, not only could Chu Tian's divine sense not spread out, his entire body felt like it was soaked in acid. His body was being corroded at every moment. Chu Tian took out a purifying pill and swallowed it. We have to leave quickly. On the left and right sides of the underground mountain range, there were actually thousands of large and small holes that had hollowed out. This made Chu Tian feel that something was wrong. When Chu Tian reached the center of the tunnel, the entire canyon began to tremble. 2-meter-long things came out of the caves. These creatures seemed to be some kind of ant-like creatures. Their bodies were wrapped in incomparably sturdy black carapace, but they had a pair of forelimbs that were as sharp as blades and translucent wings. Almost in the blink of an eye, thousands of such dark creatures surged out of the nest. Demon ants. Chu Tian recognized these rare creatures. Damn, look at what you're pointing at. The demon ants looked like ants, but they were actually demon beasts with a demon bloodline. The demon ants were fast and had strong attacks. The demon ant's carapace was a very rare and precious material because this carapace had the ability to block divine sense. Even with Chu Tian's vision domain divine sense, it was hard for him to find the demon ants beside him. How could Chu Tian have the ability to deal with this many demon wings? He quickly used a spatial teleportation. The energy here was too strong and Chu Tian's divine sense couldn't go any further, therefore it greatly limited the distance he could teleport. He could only teleport 1,000 meters away and the swarm of ants had already gathered above his head. Wung wung. The several thousand demon ants let out a strange sound at the same time. The demon ants' most dangerous attack was this. When they met their natural enemy or prey, the demon ants could connect several hundred to over 1,000 of them together, releasing a large spiritual wave. This spiritual energy was so strong that the surrounding mountains began to tremble. Chapter 524. The demon ants were a rare and precious spiritual attributed demon beast. Although their individual spiritual waves were not strong, they could only harm awakened soul cultivators or cultivators without the mind's eye. But once the spiritual energy of tens of thousands of demon ants gathered together, the destructive might they could create was not something normal people could imagine. This kind of rare demon beast that could connect and fuse with one's spiritual energy was already extinct in the era before Chu Tian crossed over. He never thought that he would have the chance to personally experience it. The underground mountain range was shaking. The stones on the ground were shaking. Pure spiritual energy affecting matter, this was a level that only vision domain realm cultivators could reach. Not to mention that after the spiritual energy fused, the scale and movement created was this big. Even if 10-8 peak vision domain realm cultivators released their divine senses together, they still wouldn't be able to create this kind of result. This was a spiritual attack condensed from the energy of the entire demon ant colony. Even if it was an expert on the level of the Elven King, if they didn't have a spiritual defense technique, it would be hard for them to escape from this kind of attack. Not to mention normal cultivators? No matter how many there were, they would all die. This was because Chu Tian was not a normal person. Because of his source spirit, he was immune to spiritual attacks, so Chu Tian was least afraid of spiritual attacks. Only the combined attack of several thousand demon ants was too strong. Even if Chu Tian's life wasn't harmed, he would at least be affected. Void escaping. Chu Tian opened the void escaping and prepared to teleport away, but it was already a bit too late. The spiritual attack was instantly released. The void escaping could dodge normal attacks, but it couldn't block spiritual attacks. When the ant colony gathered enough energy, it instantly exploded. This was a spiritual energy explosion. Chu Tian already couldn't find any other words to describe this attack. Chu Tian's brain was like the surrounding mountain range, instantly showing signs of exploding. That wave of spiritual energy that could topple mountains poured out like a river. His eyes turned black. He lost all 5 senses. His brain seemed like it was being shattered. Chu Tian's mind was not affected, rather it was his body that was affected. He lost almost all of his abilities and even the void escaping state was automatically cancelled. Not dead? That wasn't important. The demon ant turned into a dark cloud that swept down towards Chu Tian, who couldn't move. Once these dangerous creatures surrounded him, Chu Tian would probably be besieged to the point where not even a single bone could be found. Chu Tian wanted to use teleportation again, but the powerful mental energy severed Chu Tian's control over his essence force. Right now, Chu Tian had completely lost his cultivation. Oh no. The little fox was also very anxious. It knew that its master was not afraid of spiritual attacks, so it brought its master here to take the risk. It never thought that this kind of situation would occur. The little fox's strength was limited. Although it quickly controlled a portion of the demon ants, it couldn't stop the giant dark cloud. What should he do? Chu Tian's heart skipped a beat as he faced the aggressive ant swarm. He released his divine sense and sent it towards the ant swarm. Although his divine sense was blocked in the canyon, with this distance, Chu Tian's divine sense could still pass through the ant swarm and finally lock onto the target Chu Tian wanted. In the center of the tens of thousands of black demon ants, there was a larger golden demon ant. It looked very different from the other demon ants. Although its body was covered in a hard carapace, the wings on its back were demonic flesh wings and its limbs were different from arthropods. It's a king. After the demon ants' minds became one, they still needed a commander to control this power. This commander was the ant king that was different from the others. The spiritual explosion was sent out by it and the strange secret technique of cutting off cultivation was also created by it. Chu Tian's cultivation was temporarily cut off, but his vision domain divine sense was still there. The demon ants were strong as a group, but their individual strength was very weak. Even if it was an ant king, in terms of divine sense and spiritual energy, it would at most be at the peak of the mind's lamp realm, not reaching the vision domain realm. Chu Tian's divine sense directly entered another body. The ant king's divine sense entered its body and naturally it strongly resisted, but its spiritual energy was too weak. Chu Tian smoothly entered the ant king's mind and Chu Tian's divine sense merged with the ant king's spiritual energy. Chu Tian felt the ant king's spiritual energy release a wave of fear. Once again, it gathered the surrounding spiritual waves and unleashed another spiritual explosion and cultivation severing attack. This struggle had no meaning. Chu Tian was not afraid of spiritual attacks and his cultivation being cut off did not have much to do with his divine sense. When the ant king released the spiritual explosion and cultivation cut off, Chu Tian's divine sense copied the entire process. This was a very precious secret technique. This kind of secret technique couldn't be taught or written down, so it could only be copied like this. Chu Tian was about to be torn to pieces by the demon ants, but he still had the mood and energy to copy the ant king's secret technique. Spiritual ignition. Because the difference in strength between the two sides was too large, the ant king could not resist Chu Tian at all. Chu Tian used his vision domain ability to send a portion of his energy into the ant king's body. When Chu Tian successfully controlled the ant king's mind, he could use his divine sense to paralyze or kill the ant king, But just killing the Ant King was useless. The Ant King's death would at most prevent them from attacking together. If Chu Tian's cultivation couldn't be awakened, he would still be torn to pieces by the angry ant swarm. What to do? Chu Tian used a crazy self-destructive spiritual technique to ignite his own mind. Because Chu Tian's mind had already fused with the Ant King, when he ignited his own mind, he also ignited the Ant King's mind. This secret technique burned his own mind for a short period of spiritual energy, but the price was that once his spiritual energy was burned, it would be impossible for a living being to survive without spiritual energy. Because of how strong Chu Tian's source spirit was, as long as he stopped it in time, there would be some side effects, but it wouldn't harm his life. At the same time as the Ant Queen let out a shrill cry, an unbelievable scene appeared. The Ant Queen's cry seemed to spread a plague to the entire colony. The entire ant colony was affected in an instant, and all of them began to cry out shrilly. Burn! Wildly burn! The spiritual flames that couldn't be seen with the naked eye completely swallowed the ant colony. Originally, when the demon ants attacked together, Chu Tian found that their minds were connected. Therefore, as long as he ignited the core, it would quickly spread to the minds of the entire colony, burning the minds of all the demon ants. It was like a divine stroke. This ingenious attack instantly disintegrated thousands of ants, but because the minds of tens of thousands of demon ants were ignited, their spiritual energy exploded in a short period of time. When the second wave of spiritual explosion was released, it was almost 10 times stronger than the previous wave. The mountains all around them began to collapse. Chu Tian almost fainted from the torment of the severe headache. This method of burning spiritual energy to destroy the ant colony was very good, but because it was too difficult, it couldn't be imitated by others. First, not to mention the vision domain possession igniting his spiritual energy, just this level of spiritual energy explosion was something that no living being could block. When Chu Tian gradually recovered, the corpses of the demon ants covered the ground. There were no wounds on the outside, but they couldn't be more dead. Chu Tian felt dizzy and he felt very uncomfortable, wanting to vomit. This was the side effect of his spiritual energy being damaged, who told him to ignite his spiritual energy. His control over spirit energy was slowly returning. He couldn't completely recover in a short period of time, so he had to find a place to rest for a while. Fox, look at what you've done. Chu Tian's anger naturally fell onto the little fox. If it wasn't for the little fox randomly leading the way, how could Chu Tian have almost lost his little life here? On the spot, he lifted the little fox by its tail, lifted it upside down, and slapped its butt hard, causing the little fox to squeak loudly. The little fox quickly begged for mercy. It expressed that it wouldn't dare do it again. It would be strange if Chu Tian believed this fellow. If he didn't teach it a good lesson this time, it would become even more lawless in the future. When Chu Tian was prepared to make a move, the little fox pointed forward with its claw and gave a few squeaks, indicating for Chu Tian to look. Don't try to divert my attention. Today Chu Tian looked in the direction the little fox was pointing at. On the walls of the deepest part of the canyon. It was actually covered in a human head-sized crystal clear thing. Demon ant eggs? There were actually this many of them. Chu Tian remembered that the demon ants were a very rare demon beast and the value of their eggs was very high. This was an excellent material that could increase one's spiritual energy. Although spiritual sense was not completely equal to spiritual sense and spiritual sense were inextricably linked. Spiritual sense cultivation mainly relied on meditation, but if there was a material that could promote the advancement of spiritual sense, then the success rate of cultivating and comprehending spiritual sense could be greatly increased. Even if one couldn't comprehend a high-level divine sense realm, as long as one's spiritual energy was stronger than an expert of the same level, one's ability to resist spiritual energy attacks would increase. The demon ant eggs were not only valuable to Chu Tian, he could also bring them back for the young miss and Inying to use. This was a precious material that couldn't be bought with money. The little fox did not say another word as it wildly swallowed the demon ant eggs. You bastard! Chu Tian quickly took out his storage gourd. You don't have much use in fights, but when it comes to stealing spoils of war, you're faster than anyone else. Raising a pet like this, Chu Tian was truly a failure. One man and one fox quickly cleaned out the demon ant eggs. Not bad, not bad. With these demon ant eggs in hand, Chu Tian's divine sense would increase again. Although it was very dangerous this time, it was worth it in the end. Other than the 10,000 precious demon ant eggs, Chu Tian found several rare spiritual attributed level 3 sacred herbs in the canyon. These herbs could help Chu Tian repair his spiritual energy. Perfect. When Chu Tian was thinking this, there was a noise coming from the entrance of the canyon. There were the shouts of intelligent beings, like an entire army was charging over. Chapter 525. The commotion in the Demon Ant Valley was too big, so it attracted the attention of some intelligent races. Before Chu Tian could leave the valley, he was blocked by several thousand fully equipped spirit insects. There were spiders, scorpions, ants, and etc. They were all rare races on the surface. This was clearly an elite army from a large power. The Demon Ant Valley was already covered in corpses. Of course, they were all demon ant corpses. These spirit insects rushed over, and when they saw the scene in front of them, they were all stunned. There were close to 10,000 demon ants living in the demon ant nest. It was definitely a forbidden zone for life. It was hard for them to believe what had happened here that caused all these demon ants to die. Chu Tian saw that he couldn't leave, so he came out. Hi, hello everyone. The eyes of the several thousand spirit insects all gathered on Chu Tian. What kind of creature was this? These spirit insects had lived underground for generations and had never been to the surface. Over 90% of them didn't even know what humans were, so they looked at Chu Tian as if he was a new species. Could it be you killed all these demon ants? You're saying the ground is covered in insects? Chu Tian wasn't familiar with the spirit insect language, especially the ancient spirit insect language, but he could barely understand a bit. The demon ants were very dangerous things, and they were a large disaster in the valley. Now that Chu Tian had gotten rid of this disaster for these spirit insects, it would be strange if he didn't receive a hero's treatment. Right, that's right, that's right. Chu Tian quickly replied as if he was afraid someone would steal it from him. I saw the demon ants overrun this area and was afraid that they would harm the surroundings, so I used a secret technique to eliminate this group of evil creatures. Actually, you don't have to thank me too much. It's my duty to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. It's just that I've suffered some injuries because of this. If you have any immortal medicine or divine medicine that you want to take out to thank me, I won't refuse. Chu Tian's spirit insect language was a bit awkward, and the spirit insects had to use a bit of effort to understand him. It's him. Damn. The demon ants we raised were all killed by this bastard. The rhythm of the spirit insect's speech was very fast, and the pronunciation was very strange. Chu Tian couldn't clearly hear what these fellows were saying, but looking at their killing intent, Chu Tian could guess what was going on. Fuck me. What the hell? Could it be that the demon ants in the canyon were domesticated? The hobbies of these underground races were really strange. They actually raised a nest of giant ants. How rare and precious were demon ants? Chu Tian had killed all the demon ants and caused irreparable losses, so there was no need to think about what would happen next. Catch him. Catch this bastard. Chu Tian didn't even have the chance to explain. Rock spikes, wind blades, arrows, and all kinds of fierce attacks came raining down on him. Damn it. How unlucky. This is the attitude the spirit insects have towards their international friends. In any case, I am the first person to come here from the surface in thousands of years. Chu Tian's spiritual injuries had not been healed and his spirit energy had not been restored, so how could he fight in this situation? Not to mention that the other side had more people, so Chu Tian wouldn't suffer a loss like this. The little fox saw that the situation was bad and spat out several soul bottles. Each bottle exploded in the air, and the two-headed giant ape, dark gold dragon python, three-headed demon wolf, and silver earth dragon were summoned. 4 powerful level 3 demon beasts were summoned. The 4 demon beasts relied on their large bodies to block the aggressive spirit insects. Although the level 3 demon beasts were very strong, they couldn't hold on for long. Chu Tian brought the little fox to run away, but after teleporting back to the canyon, Chu Tian didn't have time to teleport away. He felt dizzy and he couldn't stand still. His nose was covered in blood. This is bad. His spiritual injuries were serious and his cultivation hadn't recovered yet. If he forcefully circulated his cultivation now, his injuries would become even worse. The mournful cries of demon beasts came from ahead. The demon beasts summoned by the little fox had already been killed. This fast? These fellows were stronger than he imagined. There was no lack of experts among the spirit insects. They were all jumping over walls and even flying in the air, moving at an extremely fast speed. With a few afterimages, Chu Tian was surrounded by several spirit insects. Oh, damn! The eggs we prepared to give to the Spider Queen have all been stolen. Damn evil thief. Tear his body to 10,000 pieces, tear his body to 10,000 pieces. The spirit insects found that the demon ant eggs were gone, making them even more furious. These eggs were tributes, and if the Spider Queen was angered, their tribes and cities would be implicated. Chu Tian was the main culprit behind all of this, so how could the spirit insects forgive him? He could only think of a way to kill his way out. Chu Tian circulated his spirit energy to summon a black treasure sword. At this time, several spirit insects came close. Chu Tian directly used the void escaping technique to nullify their attacks on him. The demon god's sword sent out several slashes of sword chi and several powerful spirit insects were easily cut down by the sword. The little fox summoned a pterosaur demon beast. Chu Tian flew into the air and landed on the pterosaur's back, preparing to ride the pterosaur out of the valley. Don't let him run. It was unknown what kind of secret technique a certain spirit insect used, but the rocks on the ground were sucked in like magnets, sticking to the pterosaur's body. It made its body feel as if it weighed over 10,000 pounds. Large amounts of rocks stabbed into its body and a large force almost pulled the pterosaur off. Chu Tian's keen senses could feel that each of the rocks stuck to him had a strong energy fluctuation. He immediately grabbed the little fox and jumped off the pterosaur's back. A series of explosions. The pterosaur was instantly blown to pieces. The other spirit insects attacked Chu Tian in the air again. Chu Tian took out a true spirit pill and took the little fox. He used his spatial energy on his head and disappeared from the eyes of these spirit insects. Where did he run off to? A rare spatial energy. The spirit insects looked around, but they couldn't find a single shadow. He looks injured. He shouldn't be able to go far. A spirit insect leader angrily roared, "You guys go back and gather some people. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, you have to find him." After around a quarter of an hour, several tens of thousands of spirit insects were mobilized and they began a carpet search of the area. These spirit insects clearly wanted to dig 3 feet into the ground to find Chu Tian. There were many tracking experts among them, and even if the little fox's divine eye could find them from a distance, with Chu Tian's current situation, it would be hard for him to escape far. Chu Tian was hiding in a cave. His face was a bit pale and his body was soaked in sweat. Although he didn't have any external injuries, the damage to his mind was more serious than his body. With his spiritual energy being heavily injured, only Chu Tian could still jump around. If it was anyone else, they would have been paralyzed and turned into a vegetable. How is it? The little fox used its claws to draw a large circle and then a smaller circle before clapping its hands. Its meaning was that the encirclement was becoming smaller and the spirit insects would soon surround them. This was simply like poking a hornet's nest. Why were there so many spirit insects in this damn place? But since he had come to an area with intelligent life forms, this was equivalent to coming into contact with the underground civilization. Although the spirit insects were not easy to deal with, he should still be able to get some information. If Chu Tian was in his normal state, he wouldn't be afraid of being caught at all. But he couldn't right now. He had to find a quiet place to heal his injuries. The little fox used its divine eye to observe the surroundings several hundred miles. It told Chu Tian everything it found, saying that there was a spirit insect city not far away. It was very large and had several million people. Chu Tian said with a nod, "This should be their nest." The little fox felt something and immediately put away its divine eye. It began to call out and pointed at the scroll on Chu Tian's waist. The spirit insects are about to surround this place. You should quickly use the transport scroll to escape. Escape? Chu Tian had come here with great difficulty. How could he just escape like this? Chu Tian thought about it before taking out the scroll and his personal items, letting the little fox put them into his space. The little fox didn't know what kind of scheme Chu Tian was planning. I'll fake my surrender and sneak into the spirit insect city to find clues. You'll secretly follow me and wait for an opportunity. Do you understand? Chu Tian didn't have time to slowly explain his plan. Because there was already a sound coming from outside, the spirit insects quickly surrounded him. The leading spirit insect loudly shouted, "Outsider, you have nowhere to run. If you don't want to die, immediately come out and surrender." The spirit insects never thought that this fellow would surrender. Who would have thought that at this time, Chu Tian would obediently come out and raise his hands high up? He said in broken spirit insect language, "Surrender, surrender. Don't kill me, I'll tell you everything." Several spirit insects charged over. Chu Tian was placed on the ground with a palm and black crystal chains were used to tie him up. Chu Tian could clearly feel that these crystal chains could suppress the flow of spirit energy in his body, making it so that Chu Tian couldn't use any of his strength. Where are the demon ant eggs? Quickly speak. The spirit insects surrounded him with killing intent. If it wasn't for the large amount of demon ant eggs missing, they would have already cut this damn outsider into 10,000 pieces. I'll speak, they're all in the hands of my companions. Chu Tian revealed a look of fear. We didn't know these demon ants were being raised. Don't kill me, I'll bring you back the demon ant eggs, how about it? The spirit insects were filled with doubt. They didn't find anything on Chu Tian and they didn't find anything in his hiding place. Could a large amount of demon ant eggs escape? It was impossible for this person to deal with a large amount of demon ants by himself. Perhaps he really did have companions. Great Commander, what do we do? First lock him up in Nikello and report to the Lord. Chu Tian was tied up by a group of spirit insects like this. These spirit insects didn't notice that there was a common fox that was following them all the way back to the underground insect city. Chapter 526. Nikello City. The spirit insects' underground city. There were around 3 million spirit insects living in the city and there were several dozen races, so it could be considered a large underground city. The spirit insects were a typical underground race that was different from the surface races. The spirit insects could eat energy ores to survive, and this energy and metal was an essential part of their cultivation. Not only could this energy be absorbed by the spirit insects, the metal could also strengthen the spirit insects' carapace, giving them a strong defense. This was why the spirit insects had a considerable amount of power and numbers, but they didn't attack the surface. This was because the underground world's resources were enough to satisfy their needs, so the spirit insects weren't used to living in the surface world. It was just like how the surface world's spirit beasts and humans never thought of attacking the underground world. This underground world was also divided into factions. There were a few very famous factions that were ruled by a few very powerful leaders. The most famous one was the Spider Queen Alexis. Alexis ruled and controlled 1/3 of the spiritual insect world's territory and population. She was also the only leader among the spiritual insects who tried to establish a stronghold in the surface world. Currently, Nikello City was a deep underground city under the jurisdiction of the Spider Queen. Chu Tian was tied up as he walked over. I'm warning you, if my companion sees me missing an arm or a leg, you can forget about taking back a single egg. Less nonsense. Chu Tian looked at Nikello City and his eyes slightly froze. This was the first time he had seen a deep underground city. Nikello City's shape and appearance was like an organ riddled with holes, currently in the stomach of a giant beast filled with tumors. There were large open spaces around the city where the spirit insects opened farms to raise dark creatures and dark crops. The spirit insects didn't have a high dependence on these things, but they still had a certain amount of demand for them. Nikello City was 3,000 meters tall and was shaped like an irregular funnel. It was large at the top and small at the bottom, connected to the ground and completely hollowed out. When one walked in, they saw the traffic network in all directions. It was like a dazzling beehive. Perhaps even the most complicated labyrinth wouldn't be able to compare to this. Chu Tian had a taste of the insect race's living area after entering the large insect nest. The spirit insects did not have any order. They didn't even have an army or administrative officials. Other than a high and mighty lord, the entire city was divided by clans, so it was very chaotic. However, there was a tacit understanding in this chaos. This was a natural tacit understanding between the spirit insects. Just like ants and bees, even if there was no commander and no laws, the lower ones would still serve the higher ones. Everyone had their own duties and things they needed to do. It was too complicated. Escaping from here was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If Chu Tian did not have the space scroll, he would not have dared to take such a risk. The spirit insect city was like a mess of blood vessels and threads, but there was a giant passage in the center. To be precise, it was a very tight pass. There were large amounts of elite spirit insect soldiers stationed there, as if they were worried that enemies would appear on the other side. Chu Tian used his divine sense to probe. After the pass, there was a large space and there was a giant tunnel that led downwards. The spirit insects locked Chu Tian in a prison made of crystal. Not only was it hard to the point that even a spirit transformation cultivator couldn't destroy it, divine sense was also completely blocked inside. Even with Chu Tian's vision domain divine sense, he couldn't sense the outside world at all. A dark elf was currently being tortured in the cell. What is your goal in coming here? Quickly say it. This young dark elf male was covered in wounds from being beaten by the spirit insects. Several spirit insects tore off the skin on his back and applied a large amount of pain medicine on his wounds. The dark elf was very strong. No matter what kind of torture he received, he didn't even make a sound. A spider soldier that brought Chu Tian in asked, "What is going on?" "A spy from the purgatory world." "What are you keeping someone from the purgatory world for?" "Just kill him." "The Lord said to keep this spy and pry out some information from his mouth, so we can't kill him." "Humph, a spy from the purgatory world and a thief from the surface, we'll lock them up together." The dark elf fainted after being tortured and was finally locked up in the same cell as Chu Tian. This was probably the most heavily guarded death cell. After all, the two of them were the biggest criminals in the city. After around 10 minutes, the dark elf recovered his will from the pain. Chu Tian looked at him curiously and asked in the elven language, "Hey, are you all right?" "Human. You know about humans? That's great." Chu Tian suddenly felt that this fellow could be communicated with. "You are a person from the purgatory world? How were you captured? How do you know about the purgatory world?" The dark elf seemed to quickly forget the pain on his body as he revealed a look of shock and disbelief. "Aren't humans a race that lives on the surface? How did you end up being captured by these subterranean world insects?" Purgatory world, subterranean world. These were two strange terms. Chu Tian could roughly guess the meaning. The underground world was divided into levels and the purgatory world was the lowest level. There were mainly ancient creatures, demons, and dark elves living there. The subterranean world was above the purgatory world. Although it was a deep underground world, compared to the purgatory world, it was much closer to the surface. The representative of the subterranean world was the spirit insects. Basically, the spirit insects ruled the entire subterranean world. This dark elf from the purgatory world was captured by the spirit insects because the relationship between the purgatory world and the subterranean world was not good. The subterranean world coveted the purgatory world's resources and the purgatory world also wanted the subterranean world. Both sides coveted each other more than the surface world. Chu Tian didn't have the awareness of a death row prisoner as he crossed his legs and leaned against the wall. "I am the city lord of a forest city on the surface. Because the underground dark creatures have caused a bit of trouble for the city, I came down to investigate. Who would have thought that I would accidentally kill the ants raised by these insects and was captured by them?" The dark elf was very shocked. He had reason to be suspicious and shocked. The surface world wasn't far from the subterranean world, but there were large amounts of dark creature nests, lava volcanoes, natural danger zones, and various dangerous environments, so there weren't many paths that could be taken. Could he come here from the surface world alone? The dark elf even suspected that this human was a method for the spirit insects to obtain information from him. Chu Tian saw the dark elf was silent, so he took the initiative to ask, "Do you know what is going on?" The underground demon beasts were caused by the loosening of the purgatory world's Devil's Gate. This kind of matter doesn't happen often, so you don't need to pay with your life. Now that you've been captured, you won't have a chance to leave alive. Prepare to die. That's not necessarily true. I can see that you know quite a bit. How about you escape with me? Humph, can you still move like this? Do all the surface creatures like to talk big like you? Chu Tian gave a soft whistle. The little fox appeared in the center of the cell in a black mist. The dark elf revealed a look of shock. This is... Without saying anything else, the little fox bit through the chains and spat out a scroll for him. Chu Tian freed the stunned dark elf and gave him another spatial scroll. This is a spatial transport scroll. As long as you open it, you can return to the surface. Now come with me. I saved your life and you tell us the information we want. It's very fair. Don't say anymore, let's go. The dark elf hesitated a bit, but he gave the scroll back to Chu Tian. No, I can't go. I have to return to the purgatory world. Return to the purgatory world? Nikello City is planning an invasion. I have to bring this news back. Fuck, did you have a screw loose in your head? Didn't you see how tight Nikello City's defenses were? Not to mention this fellow, even if it was Great Master Chu Tian, he wouldn't dare say he could leave. If your excellency can help us, our purgatory people will thank you. There's no need to thank me. Chu Tian rolled his eyes. How do you want me to help you? Nikello City is one of the main purgatory passages in the subterranean world, and there is a purgatory pass at the bottom of Nikello City. As long as we can pass through the pass, we will have a chance to return to the purgatory world. Actually, it was not easy for Chu Tian to come here, and he didn't want to go back to Miracle City like this. The problem now was that Nikello City's defenses were tight and Chu Tian's condition was not good, so how could he fish in troubled waters? How could he escape from the heavily guarded prison and pass through the pass? The dark elf saw Chu Tian's silence. I know this matter is difficult for your excellency. Since it's like this, I'll go by myself. We'll say our goodbyes here. You'll go? What was the difference between this and suicide? It would be better to just kill yourself in the prison. Chu Tian had the transport scroll in his hands, so he had a chance to escape. Now that he was looking for a guide to the underground purgatory world, why wouldn't he take this chance to take a look at the purgatory world? The little fox bravely called out. It was also very interested in the purgatory world, and it offered a plan to Chu Tian. You have a way to stall for time? The little fox blew on the ground and the scene in the prison changed. Two people appeared out of thin air and were currently tied up in the prison. Illusion substitute? It was just a small trick. The little fox used its demonic technique again, and this time it was used on Chu Tian and the dark elf. The two of them felt a power enter their bodies and their bodies began to change, turning into the appearance of a spider. This move wasn't bad. The little fox had eaten this many things, but it wasn't completely useless. These demonic techniques were very normal to Chu Tian, and if he looked carefully, there was a large chance of being seen through, but it was more than enough to fish in troubled waters. Alright, I'll give it a try. Chu Tian's eyes turned white and he released his spatial energy, instantly taking in the dark elf. Let's go. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.